Chapter 2238 Competition. Chapter 2238 Competition. Originally, this great beast could have become the ruler of this world. It had been doted on by the heavens, and its strength had even surpassed the regulations. If it had been given a little bit more time to grow, then even the regulations could not have possibly harmed it. Yet now it was forced to battle ahead of time, and the result was that it could only die in despair, so it was naturally filled with dissatisfaction. But at this moment, not one person dared to approach. Who knew if this great beast still had a breath of life in it? This kind of existence was too terrifying, and even if it was a fifth secret monarch tier that approached, they would only be insta-killed. The heavenly tribulation began to rapidly disperse. Not only did the dark clouds in the skies disappear, even that ocean of flames was rapidly dying out, and a massive deep abyss had been left in its place, its depths unfathomable. Move! Ling Han and the Rain Emperor darted out at the same time, one charging towards the deep pit, while the other charged towards the great beast. Xiao, xiao, xiao! It was not just them. Everyone in the surrounding proximity was like a shark that had smelt blood, all shooting out towards that great beast and wanting to take their own share of the loot. Scram! I am descended from Celestial King Zhang. Do you dare contend with me? Tui! I am the 7th generation grandson of the enlightened heaven Celestial King. Who do you think you are? We of the Chong clan announce that this great beast is ours now. As they fought, they called out loudly, all attempting to use their background to scare off the others so they could monopolize the profits. But there were really too many Celestial Kings in Clear Heaven Pass. Merely 9th Heaven Celestial Kings numbered in the dozens, and there were naturally even more Celestial Kings below that grade, who could be able to scare off the others. Even if there were differences in level among Celestial Kings, who would care in such a chaotic situation? They were all attacking madly. Ling Han ignored them. He was sure that with the strength of the Rain Emperor, Hunyo, and the others, even if they could not monopolize this great beast entirely, they would be able to take a great share of the loot at the very least. He streaked through the deep abyss, trying his best to recall the spot that the great beast had emerged from. It's right here. Very soon he located a spot because in this relatively flat bottom of the pit, there was actually another massive deep pit with indiscernible depths. Of course, compared to this ocean, this pit was much smaller. Its diameter was around several thousands of meters. Judging by the size, it very much matched the size of that great beast. Without hesitation, Ling Han leaped into the pit. At first, it was complete darkness here, but he soon glimpsed light. Those were actually stars. This heaven and earth was developing its own world, just like this realm that they were in, where there existed the ancient realm and the celestial realm. It was also the same here. Another level was presently being developed inside, filled with stars, the sun and moon hanging in the skies. In this place, Ling Han discovered that he was incredibly powerful. He could destroy a star with a single breath. This was not a misconception, but that was indeed the case. If he returned to the ancient realm, he could easily destroy a star just by stretching out his hand. However, the heaven and earth had their own rules. He was too strong, and if he went to the ancient realm, he would definitely be under severe restrictions, his battle prowess suppressed to the extent that would be allowed by the ancient realm. Otherwise, he would definitely be expelled by the heaven and earth back to the celestial realm, or be crushed and die there. The ancient realm was only weak in regulations, but the heaven and earth was still the heaven and earth, and even a heavenly venerate could not possibly stand against the heaven and earth. Ling Han traversed through the pit. This place did not seem like the place that the great beast had resided in, and what was more important was that what he had first glimpsed was clearly an eye, and definitely did not look anything like that great beast. The feeling that this eye gave him was too extraordinary, so what Ling Han was truly searching for was that eye. He faltered slightly because he sensed a frightening aura surge from behind him. Someone was rapidly approaching, and it was not just one person at that. Ling Han stopped, turned around, and looked behind him. A young man was presently flying rapidly, and there were a few more people running on air behind him. Scram! As the young man came close, he stretched out a hand to grab Ling Han. Boom! His origin power formed a terrifying, gigantic hand. Wherever he passed, the stars would all be instantly destroyed. These stars had just been formed and were very fragile in the first place. So how could they possibly match the might of a fifth secret immortal Palantir? Ling Han frowned slightly. Previously, he had already exhausted his stores of dragon qi completely to stand against the sound wave blasted out by that great beast. Now, it was naturally impossible that he would have any more strength to face the attack of a fifth secret monarch tier head-on. However, this man was really too harsh. If anyone was to say the word scram, it should be Ling Han, who would have that right as the first person who had discovered this place. How domineering! Ling Han humphed and used void space. He formed thousands of copies of himself and easily dodged this blow. That young man showed a hint of surprise as his advance came to an abrupt halt. His eyes glowed brightly, focused on Ling Han. To be able to dodge the strike of me, Meng Feiqing, you are not too ordinary. He crossed his hands behind him and declared, not too bad, I will give you a chance to become my dog. As the personal disciple of a ninth heaven celestial king, he did have the right to be arrogant. Ling Han had not made any reply, and the third wave of people had already arrived. This was a group of 9 young people who practically looked the same. Their attire was also identical, and no one would be able to distinguish one from the rest. Oh, so it is Brother Meng, the 9 people spoke at the same time. It was clearly 9 men that were speaking, yet just by the sound alone, it was as if it was a single person that had spoken, which was extremely bizarre. Meng Feiqing turned around to take a look, and his gaze flickered slightly. However, he revealed nothing in his expression as he asked, The 9 tigers of the Chang clan? This is already my territory, so please give me some face and leave here. The Chang clan was also a 9th heaven celestial king tier force. The encompassing age celestial king was not the slightest bit inferior to his own master, so he naturally dared not act too arrogant. Furthermore, the Chang clan was blessed by the heavens. Not only had all 7 sons of the encompassing age celestial king become celestial kings, these 9 tigers were also birthed by the same mother from the same womb. Though they only had the aptitude of an emperor tier, the 9 of them were connected mentally, and they could match a monarch tier together. Hence, these 9 people were his strong opponents. We've been hoping to ask Brother Meng to show us some face and hand this place over to us, the 9 tigers of Chang clan all said, the 9 of them speaking like one. Ling Han couldn't help but smile slightly. If Hu Niu was here, she would definitely be extremely curious. Do you guys eat together? Do you guys also use the toilet together? Do you each marry one wife or share one among yourselves? Then, what about the consummation of marriage? Would the other 8 just be standing by and watching? Meng Feiqing's expression darkened, and he said, I have promised my master to deliver a precious gift to him. Do you all wish to force me to return empty-handed? The 9 tigers of Chang clan also smirked coldly. We have also been commanded by our ancestors to take control of this neutral zone and cannot allow anyone to even take a single grass or tree. So we fear that Brother Meng's wish cannot be fulfilled. So we can only settle it through battle then. Meng Feiqing asked calmly. Under normal circumstances, he naturally would not fear the 9 tigers of Chang clan, but in this place, power of regulation was limited. He feared that he would encounter a strong opponent even after defeating the 9 tigers of Chang clan. If that happened, it was possible that he would be no match. Of course, this powerful opponent did not include Ling Han. He was a mere first secret, and even if he was a monarch tier, Meng Feiqing would be able to suppress the former easily with a single move. Let's battle! The 9 tigers of Chang clan all exclaimed loudly. emanating a blazing fighting spirit. Meng Feiqing did not make a move, but rather looked into the distance. However, we, too, cannot pave the way for someone else's success. The 9 tigers of Chong clan all looked over as well. Brother Liu, how long are you going to stay hidden? Meng Feiqing asked calmly. Chapter 2239 The Various Forces. Chapter 2239 The Various Forces. Hee, as expected of Brother Meng. Even this hasn't been able to deceive you. With a laugh, boom, a star suddenly exploded into bits, and a young man walked out from within. Compared to the star, he was naturally negligible in size, but the aura he exuded far surpassed that, as if he was a giant that supported the heavens. Liu Sanbian. Meng Feiqing's eyes narrowed slightly. I thought that my concealing heaven and earth mystical power had already reached a great height, but I never thought that Brother Meng would still see through it. You truly are amazing. The young man, Liu Sanbian, said smilingly, but though his smile was very calm, it emanated a coldness and was filled with wariness against Meng Feiqing. He was filled with confidence in his concealment technique, and thought that only ascending origin tiers would be able to discover his presence, yet Meng Feiqing had easily seen through it, which naturally filled him with killing intent. Yet Meng Feiqing smiled calmly and said, You're wrong. I have merely made a deduction based on your personality, and assumed that someone like you would definitely have hidden himself in the shadows to take advantage of a crisis for personal gain, and just drew you out. I had not expected that you really had been there. This. Involuntarily, Liu Sanbian's expression turned ugly. He had actually been drawn out. This Meng Feiqing was really too despicable. His battle prowess was not the slightest bit inferior to that of Meng Feiqing and the 9 tigers of Chong clan, but because of his personality, he had always preferred to take advantage. Yet now, Meng Feiqing had drawn him out ahead of time, which made him feel extremely pissed. The 9 brother tigers of the Chong clan. Shall we first work together and chase Meng Feiqing off? He suggested. They would not dare commit murder. Meng Feiqing had a powerful background. His master was the Forever Sword Celestial King, and it was rumored that he had achieved Tao through his divine sword. In terms of strength, he could rank in the top 10 even among 9th Heaven Celestial Kings. If Meng Feiqing was killed, this Forever Sword Celestial King would definitely not give up the matter, and would shake even the clear heaven pass. Sure, the 9 tigers of Chong clan agreed. To avoid any sudden changes, why don't we move immediately? Liu Sanbian asked smilingly. As time passed, who knew if there would be more elites coming here, and the power of regulation that everyone could use was limited. Even if they now knew that the beast meat here could replenish their power of regulation, how much could they actually prepare beforehand? They had to occupy this place as soon as possible and make that a fact. Meng Feiqing laughed loudly and said, Before that, the Liu clan, as well as the 9 members of the Chong clan, don't you think we should first get rid of this outsider? He is just a first secret, Liu Sanbian immediately declared disdainfully. Meng Feiqing, you are really falling farther and farther behind, being wary of even a first secret. This man is not that ordinary, Meng Feiqing said. At the very least, I have not been able to kill him with a single strike. This man was really quite harsh. To get rid of Ling Han, he actually willingly slapped himself in the face. Of course, this was not a painful strike, but it was still a blow to his pride after all. The 9 tigers of Chong clan and Liu Sanbian all fixed their eyes on Ling Han, a strange look on their faces. Who cares if this brat is really all that strong? Since he is an outsider, we should first get rid of him and talk of other things, Liu Sanbian immediately declared. This is our territory, and even an outsider wants a share of the loot. The 9 tigers of Chong clan smirked coldly. There is no sign of them in the resistance against the foreign realm, and now that there are benefits to be had, they have all come over. How could there be such a good thing? Ling Han naturally was cursing Meng Feiqing in his heart. Ling Han actually had planned to take advantage of their internal strife, but had not thought that Meng Feiqing would be so malicious, dragging him into the matter as well, and as the one to bear the brunt at that. However, he naturally would not be showing weak morale and said, "Don't speak of yourselves in such a noble manner. With the invasion of the foreign realm, there is no possible way that anyone beneath the celestial king tier could match them, and they would only be dying for nothing. Furthermore, generations and generations of celestial kings would ultimately come here, and wouldn't it be for nothing else but to contribute their own power for the sake of the celestial realm? Instead, it is you people that only know to boast about the past glories of your ancestors, while you yourselves will only contend fiercely for your own pride, which is absolutely useless." With these words, Meng Feiqing and the others all bore menacing looks. As they saw it, Ling Han's only reaction was to flee in a panic. In truth, they did not have such strong intentions to kill Ling Han, and merely wanted to scare him off. It was definitely impossible that they would pursue him to kill him. How could they possibly take to heart such a minor character? But Ling Han actually dared to mock them, and this was unacceptable to them, even if what Ling Han said was completely true. What a toxic mouth! "You're seeking death." They all spoke coldly, their gaze directed at Ling Han, filled with killing intent. Ling Han was unafraid, and stood with his arms crossed behind his back as he said, "Come, let me see what strength you so-called prodigies actually have. Die." Lu Sanbian was the first to move, sending out a palm strike. It turned into a massive millstone that descended on Ling Han. This blow was very frightening as the regulations surged, and pung, 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 the stars in the surrounding area all exploded one after another. Ling Han used void space and could advance and retreat with ease. Lu Sanbian and the 9 tigers of Chang clan all looked astonished, shocked by the strength that Ling Han exhibited. In their minds, since Lu Sanbian had already moved, that definitely would result in an easy capture. Meng Feiqing had indeed not spoken wrongly. This brat was quite strange. Then let us work together to get rid of this outsider that knows not what is good for him, the 9 tigers of Chang clan declared, and the 9 of them separated a bit, sealing off an angle. Lu Sanbian and Meng Feiqing also sealed off an angle each, forming a triangular siege, while Ling Han was in the center. Though they were bullying him with an advantage in numbers, and there was a great disparity in their cultivation levels, Meng Feiqing and the others did not show the slightest bit of embarrassment. He was a mere first secret, and there was no way that they would consider him a rival. In that case, it was naturally the sooner he was killed, the better, and then that they could focus their time on serious matters. Boom! The 3 sides moved at the same time, sealing off all routes of escape for Ling Han. Ling Han's left hand controlled space, while his right hand manipulated time. The 2 regulations channeled, and time and space were immediately disturbed. He raised a foot and disappeared from where he was standing. When he reappeared again, he was already incredibly far away. Regulations of space. Lu Sanbian's brow creased into a frown. The regulations outside the 5 elements were all extraordinarily strong, and the regulations of space were one of the strongest among them. No, there are also regulations of time, Meng Feiqing added. At this, Lu Sanbian's frown deepened even further. The regulations of time could be considered invincible against all opponents of equal cultivation level before the celestial king tier. In fact, it could completely transform a king tier, allowing his battle prowess to directly soar to the level of emperor tier. Ling Han crossed his hands behind his back, appearing completely relaxed. "That is all your strength? Hee, you are only so strong." What boastful words! Meng Feiqing and the others were all outraged and moved once more. Boom! Divine chains immediately formed from various types of regulations, spreading all over the space, and the light of Tao exploded madly, shattering all the surrounding stars. Ling Han chuckled and only continuously channeled the regulations of time and space, moving smoothly. He had absolutely no intention to take them head-on. There was naturally no future to be had should he confront them head-on. There was no possible way he could match a fifth secret monarch tier. What more when it was equivalent to having 3 fifth secret monarch tiers now? Meng Feiqing and the others all used various celestial techniques, wanting to suppress Ling Han or even kill him, yet could not even touch a corner of Ling Han's robes. They did not summon their pseudo-celestial tools, because this would be an additional expense of their power of regulation. Unless they had absolute certainty of a victory, this would only increase the expense of their power of regulation. Additionally, a celestial king tier decree would not be of much use here, either, because this place restricted cultivation level. If they summoned a celestial king tier decree, it would be directly crushed and destroyed by the heaven and earth. Ling Han naturally was absolutely calm and unhurried. Chapter 2240 Origin Magic Cube. Chapter 2240 Origin Magic Cube. In this space, Ling Han had absolute confidence that he could tire anyone to death, unless the opponent also possessed a heavenly venerable tier, precious treasure, and could extract power of regulation without end for a few days. The 12 of them all had extremely fast movement techniques. Schwa, schwa, schwa. One with poor vision would not be able to catch sight of their true selves at all, and would only feel that people filled the whole space around them. That was because Ling Han and the others were moving too rapidly, leaving behind countless afterimages. Come on then. Ling Han laughed loudly, his figure unpredictable in its movements. Meng Feiqing and the rest had already been angered by Ling Han and were determined to capture him. They all charged forwards earnestly, striking violently all the while, and wanting to restrict his movement technique. They did not worry at all that their power of regulation would be completely exhausted, because they were equivalent to 3 fifth secret monarch tiers. Any one of them had who knew how many times more power of regulation than that locked in Ling Han's body. What more when there were 3 of them? If one was really going to be exhausted, it would have to be Ling Han that would first use all his power of regulation. Ling Han was very evil. As he ran, he continued to take out beast meat for consumption, looking like he was about to completely exhaust his power of regulation and had to consume beast meat to replenish what he had expended. Meng Feiqing and the others naturally believed it completely. He was merely a first secret, so it was naturally impossible that he could last very long. Let's put in some more effort. Lu Sanbian showed a twisted expression. Though beast meat can replenish the power of regulation, that would only be like a cup of water thrown on a burning cart of firewood. He will not be able to last long. Ling Han laughed internally. What he was devouring was not at all the meat of the living creatures here, but rather the beast meat of the celestial realm. However, it had already been roasted into dried meat, so who would be able to tell the difference? He ran non-stop and also ate continuously, expending who knew how much beast meat. Meng Feiqing and the others all wanted to stop Ling Han, press him down, and then ask him, "Just how many living creatures of this place have you fuck-hunted? How can you continue to eat without end?" If one continuously ate like him, even a mountain of meat would be completely devoured. After chasing for a while longer, all their expressions shifted slightly. That was because they discovered that their power of regulation was running out too quickly, and their speed was actually declining. They were even more shocked. Just how much beast meat had Ling Han consumed that he could actually tire them out to this extent? It could not be helped. They, too, could only take out some beast meat for replenishment. If they really were to exhaust all their power of regulation, fifth secret monarch tiers and emperor tiers like them would all be trash. They would be even weaker than severing mundane tiers. Ling Han saw this happen and couldn't help but smirk coldly. It was almost time for him to turn his defensive stance around to an offensive stance. He continued to run. He had already run for a great many days. He did not know how far he had traveled in this space, but there was practically no change in the surrounding scenery at all. Massive stars were all around them, and the whole space was barren and silent. He paused suddenly and saw that a multicolored light was actually gushing out ahead of him, looking incredibly beautiful and amazing. He took a few more steps forwards. He had instantly left millions and millions of km behind him. There was a mysterious regulations of space in this place. Otherwise, there would definitely be no way that the neutral zone could be this huge. Now he could see, clearly, the object that was gushing out multicolored light was actually a cube, but this cube was made up of 27 smaller cubes, and every cube was of a different color. Upon a closer look, every smaller cube was further made up of 27 even smaller cubes, and in that manner they split on without end or bounds, and an eye would occasionally appear on the face of the cube that faced Ling Han, which looked extremely profound. Ling Han merely glanced at it, and his complete attention was drawn to it. He actually forgot that there were still 12 elites pursuing him from behind. However, he was a monarch star after all. When the frightening gust of attack approached, he still reacted in time and hurriedly channeled the indestructible heaven scroll. Golden light flowed all over his body, and ancient seals appeared one after another. He was instantly sent flying, but was not wounded at all. This is Meng Feiqing, and the others had also seen that cube, and just like Ling Han, they also looked dazed. Ling Han had completely gotten his wits back, and couldn't help but exclaim internally at how amazing it was to actually cause his attention to be completely absorbed. The core of heaven and earth. This exclamation was heard from Meng Feiqing's mouth. However, the moment he spoke these words, he immediately looked regretful. He had really been too excited, or there would have been absolutely no way that he would have leaked such an enormous secret with his subtlety. Meanwhile, Lu Sanbian smirked coldly. Meng Feiqing, it is just not you that knows the secret of the core of heaven and earth. Moreover, my ancestor has also predicted that this core of heaven and earth is named the Origin Magic Cube. However, this world is ultimately merely created from the clash of two realms and cannot be truly considered a great world. So the power of heaven and earth is only pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Only pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. His tone was filled with contempt and disdain. Actually, it was not that his scope was very high, but rather because when the celestial king behind him said this, that was the tone he had used, and Lu Sanbian subconsciously imitated that tone. Otherwise, how could a mere fifth secret actually dare to cast contempt on the power of the heavenly venerable tier? This sounded very shocking, but upon further pondering, even a heavenly venerable tier could only reign above regulations, and they were still extremely negligible in front of the power of heaven and earth. However, the power of heaven and earth in this place was only at the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, which was extremely far off from genuine great worlds like the celestial realm and foreign realm. But when Ling Han heard this, he revealed a stunned expression. A treasure of the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. You must obtain this Origin Magic Cube. Small Tower suddenly spoke up. This world had restrictions on all below the Immortal Palace tier. Even if it was a heavenly venerable tier tool, it was not willing to stand against it. That was because even if this heaven and earth was not complete, its power was still endless and boundless, surpassing all individuals. Small Tower did not even communicate anything mentally, and that was precisely because it did not want to be targeted by the heaven and earth here. Yet, at this moment, it had suddenly spoken, which showed just exactly how important this Origin Magic Cube was. Ling Han nodded. He had come for the treasure here in the first place, so there was naturally no reason for him to give it up. However, he asked mentally, what can it be used for? If you can refine this treasure, your cultivation level will directly soar to the 9th heaven celestial king tier. But your Tao will only be limited to that level, Small Tower said. However, the Origin Magic Cube is the core of this heaven and earth, and can completely control this heaven and earth. If you can obtain it, you will be master of this heaven and earth. Studying the channeling of this heaven and earth, you will have a chance of touching the level above regulations, and that is the heavenly venerable tier. Of course, this heaven and earth is not complete and is very backward. The level you will be able to grasp will definitely not be very high, but it will still be extremely helpful. Ling Han nodded. No wonder all the great forces had sent out their outstanding descendants and disciples into this space. They had all come for the origin magic cube. Thus, he was even more determined to obtain it. Xiao Meng Feiqing was the first to charge out, grabbing out at the origin magic cube. However, the origin magic cube was as massive as a star. This rush from him was just like an ant charging forwards to move a great mountain, appearing to have bitten extremely much more than he could chew. Humph, this is mine. Lu Sanbian also moved as well. He had heard his elders say that the origin magic cube was connected to the great secret of the heavenly venerable tier, and definitely could not be missed. If they could obtain this treasure, the Lu clan would definitely flourish for generations and surpass all celestial kings, becoming the true great emperor at the pinnacle of this world. It is ours. The 9 tigers of Chang clan were no exception either. The 9 of them worked together like they were one and the same. At present, they could no longer be bothered about Ling Han. Yet Ling Han smirked coldly. The power of regulation of these 12 people was close to complete exhaustion. They were just waiting to be beaten by him one by one. Chapter 2241. Uniting against an external enemy. Chapter 2241. Uniting against an external enemy. Meng Feiqing, Lu Sanbian, and the 9 tigers of the Chang clan broke into an intense battle. The 9 tigers of the Chang clan were all 5th secret emperor tiers, though there was indeed a great gap between emperor tier and monarch tier. Firstly, they had an advantage in numbers, and secondly, they were birthed by the same mother and nurtured in the same womb, so they had a mental connection. When they worked together, it was like they were one person and were much stronger than any 9 other 5th secret emperor tiers that worked together. The 9 of them could be considered as one person. The 3 people battled intensely, all wanting to suppress the other 2 contenders so they could take the origin magic cube for their own. Perhaps they were not fully aware of the effects of the origin magic cube, but just knowing the slightest bit about it would cause them to scrabble madly over it. Ling Han watched from the sidelines, in no rush to make his own move. As the 3 great elites fought fiercely, they consumed beast meat to replenish their power of regulation, but this was completely unable to make ends meet. A decline was already appearing in their battle prowess. They were all anxious, yet there was nothing they could do. When they had battled to such an extent, there was already no way out for them. So this is the character of ants from a lower dimension? A cold laugh rang out, and a strange creature appeared. He had the form of a praying mantis, but was innumerable times larger than normal, and was comparable to the size of a bull. He was completely black, his eyes massive and occupying at least half of his head. Upon a closer look, his eyes were compound eyes, and looked like they were filled with stars, flashing with the light of regulations. His cultivation level was not clear, but the aura exuding from him was incredibly powerful, causing Meng Feiqing and the others to involuntarily stop their battle. A prodigy of the foreign realm. Ling Han was slightly surprised. Dimension. This was a novel term. He had never heard anyone of the celestial realm use this term before, but this creature was communicating its intent through divine sense, so there was no possibility of hearing it wrong. Furthermore, the celestial realm was actually a lower dimension. Then was the foreign realm a higher dimension? Bug from the foreign realm, do you seek death? Meng Feiqing shouted, glaring at this mantis-like creature from the foreign realm. Though the 9 tigers of the Chang clan and Lu Sanbian did not speak, they, too, had redirected their animosity towards this outsider. Since childhood, they had been taught that they were incompatible with the foreign realm, and there was no possibility of compromise or peaceful terms between the two sides. It would either be the celestial realm being destroyed, or the foreign realm would have to be expelled, and the connecting point of the two realms had to be sealed off. The mantis bared his mouth in a grin. He was clearly bug-shaped, but was incredibly human-like as he retorted, "I am Kahad, a descendant of the glorious shadow race. Though this origin magic cube is not considered all that valuable in our dimension, it is still a treasure anyhow. Kahad shall accept it. Just because you say so, is it yours?" Lu Sanbian scoffed. "Trash of the lower dimension. Could it be that you have forgotten your terrible defeats in the 2 instances of martial arts tournament?" Kahad laughed raucously. "Trash like you all are at the lowest grade of a lower dimension, and have completely no idea just how many powerful races there are in this dimensional universe." He paused and then continued, "Compared to our shadow race, you are practically trash among trash." Ling Han listened from the sidelines and couldn't help but feel secretly shocked, though it had only been a few scattered words from Kahad. He seemed to have pried into a great many secrets. However, he was still very unfamiliar with many of his words. What was the concept of dimension? And what did dimensional universe mean? "Small Tower, do you know?" he asked secretly. "This is probably a maniac," Small Tower stated calmly. Ling Han did not think that Kahad was a maniac. On the contrary, this guy was really strong, and the aura that seeped out from him caused even him to feel a chill. "Kill this bug of the foreign realm," the 9 tigers of the Chang clan exclaimed in unison. "All right." Meng Feiqing and Lu Sanbian also nodded in succession. "Want to kill Kahad?" Kahad smirked coldly. "I am at the peak of 8th Lotus, which is equivalent to your immortal palace tier. However, I have come from the rare earth dimension, which is uncountable times higher in grade than this lowest grade dimension of yours. In a battle of equal battle prowess, it will naturally be one-sided as well." With a battle cry, he raised a limb and struck at Lu Sanbian and the others. Suddenly, a massive back-colored insect, leg, descended from the skies. It was covered with inverted spikes. They were like sharp weapons with multiple black seals covering their surface, and were inconceivably frightening. Lu Sanbian and the others all smirked coldly, and each made their move, attacking Kahad in unison. Boom! 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 In this 4-sided great battle, though Kahad had been boasting very greatly, his battle prowess was actually just comparable to that of Lu Sanbian or Meng Feiqing. Logically, he would definitely have lost in a battle of 1 against 3. However, he possessed one of Ling Han's abilities, and that was being especially resilient against attack. His outer shell was like a supreme celestial tool. No matter how Lu Sanbian and the others attacked, it was still undamaged. Instead, he managed to take advantage of any openings and countered repeatedly, forcing Lu Sanbian and the others into a tizzy. Ling Han watched, and realization dawned on him. It was no wonder that the 2 sparring contests between the celestial realm and foreign realm had both ended in terrible defeat. If all the cultivators of the foreign realm had such astonishing defenses, then they naturally had an absolute advantage in a one-on-one situation. He couldn't help but wonder if he would be able to pierce through Kahad's defenses. The great clash of source powers should be able to do the job, but he had already given up on the 9 source powers of heaven and earth, so it was naturally no longer possible for him to use this kind of secret technique again. If he used Fists of Fury, would its power be enough? Ling Han couldn't help but doubt the divine demon sword. However, this pseudo-celestial tool was still on the level of 4 stars, so it should be completely ineffective against Kahad's defenses. It could not be helped. For the sake of advancing to the pinnacle of alchemy, the savings Ling Han had accumulated all these years had all been spent on purchasing the ingredients for alchemy, and he had not had any chance to upgrade the divine demon sword. He was just making a comparison when he saw that Kahad was already enjoying the upper hand. It was not because Kahad's strength was clearly superior, but rather that Lu Sanbian and the others had first been pursuing Ling Han, and then they had fought among themselves fiercely, expending too much of their power of regulation. They were already close to the end of their line, so how could they hold up against the energetic and lively Kahad? Weak, really too weak. Kahad laughed coldly, his tone filled with utter contempt. As his 6 legs swept out, they were like 6 celestial tools dancing around and striking, their destructive power incredibly terrifying. The lowest grade dimension can only nurture such trash. The eyes of Lu Sanbian and the others were all spitting fire in their fury. But how could it be that they could explain to him that they had long since been exhausted from a previous battle, and now it was completely not their true, genuine strength? Die. Kahad was merciless, planning to eliminate all 11 people of the celestial realm. Ancestral teachings. Meng Feiqing suddenly exclaimed loudly. Lu Sanbian and the 9 tigers of the Chong clan all faltered, and then their expressions became solemn. When encountering the foreign realm, we must battle to the death, and must absolutely not retreat. Meng Feiqing nodded. The origin magic cube has great implications, and must definitely not be allowed to fall into the hands of the foreign realm. Hence, even if it means that we have to battle to the bitter end and die, we must still cause enough of a delay so that our own people can come. Yes, Lu Sanbian and the 9 tigers of the Chong clan all nodded, dismissing any ideas of fleeing. The 11 of them all drummed up their remaining courage, determined to suppress Kahad. However, their present strength was really not all that great and could not threaten Kahad at all. Instead, their blood was spurting in all directions from his attacks. At first, Ling Han had planned to take advantage of the crisis for his personal gain, but seeing the actions of Meng Feiqing and the others at these final moments, his heart was moved. Though the way these people handled matters displeased him, at least in terms of righteousness, they still had grasp of their virtuous cause. Internal matters could be dealt with among themselves behind closed doors, but now it was the time to resist an external enemy. Xiao! Ling Han's figure flashed, and he had already appeared in front of Meng Feiqing, shooting out a punch at Kahad. Chapter 2242, Showing Off His Might. Chapter 2242, Showing Off His Might. Pum! With a heavy blow, Ling Han was immediately sent flying, and also crashed into Meng Feiqing, who was baying him. The 2 of them were sent flying together. Yet Kahad looked furious. This blow from him had initially been enough to stab Meng Feiqing to death. He had not thought that Ling Han would have interfered. Though both Ling Han and Meng Feiqing had been sent flying, they had only sustained minor injuries. No, Meng Feiqing had still thrown up a few mouthfuls of blood. That guy who had just appeared was completely unscathed. A sliver of shock flashed through his eyes. This newly appeared guy had just advanced into 8th Lotus, so his strength should be extraordinarily weak. How had he managed to sustain a blow from him? Furthermore, he had exchanged a blow with Ling Han, so he could very clearly sense Ling Han's battle prowess. He was at about the 5th level of 8th Lotus. This was a demonic star. He thought thus internally, while killing intent immediately blazed in his eyes. I have not thought that there would also be a prodigy like you in such a super low-level dimension. I cannot allow you to live. Super low grade. Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. At first he called them low level, and now it was super low level. This guy was really looking down on the celestial realm. Stinky bug, come battle. Ling Han crooked his finger, his expression incredibly disdainful. Lu Sanbian and the others were all shocked. They had not expected that Ling Han would actually step out at this moment, and Meng Feiqing had not thought that Ling Han would actually move to save him, either. I only did not want you all to die in the hands of a stinky bug from the foreign realm, Ling Han stated calmly. If you have to die, I should be the one to kill you. Haha, same here, same here. Lu Sanbian and the others all retorted laughingly. There was definitely no friendship between Ling Han and them, but in the stance against the foreign realm, they were completely united. After they dealt with Kahad, they would still battle fiercely to the death for the sake of the Origin magic cube. Kuhad was naturally furious. His innumerable compound eyes blinked simultaneously, exuding an incredibly evil air, and millions of seals dimmed at the same time, filled with threat. Trash of the super low-level dimension. He charged out. Though his body was bulky, his movements were incredibly agile. In a flash, he had already arrived in front of Ling Han. His 6 legs moved at the same time, just like 6 heavenly axes descending. Ling Han used void space added with the regulations of time and confronted Kuhad. Kuhad appeared slightly surprised. With differing dimensions, there would also be differences in regulations, but some regulations were universal. For example, the regulations of time, the regulations of space. These regulations were extraordinarily powerful. Hence, after Ling Han channeled the regulations of time and space together, Kuhad was also slightly stunned because there were not many such prodigies in the foreign realm, either. I definitely cannot allow you to live. He opened his mouth, and his 2 insect fangs, which were astonishingly huge, actually each had a seal, which was presently glowing, making these 2 fangs of his almost seem like celestial tools themselves. He suddenly directed a bite at Ling Han, and his insect fangs enlarged endlessly, clamping down harshly towards Ling Han. So powerful! Ling Han immediately discovered that this blow was not merely targeting him, but encompassed all the surrounding space as well. No matter where he repurred via void space, he would still sustain the harsh blow. However, he was unafraid and merely channeled the indestructible heaven scroll. His figure was as indestructible as diamond, and pung, he took this attack head-on. Die. Lu Sanbian and the others did not stand by idly, either, and each moved to attack Kuhad. Boom! 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 A great battle ensued once more. Though Ling Han's indestructible heaven scroll was powerful, he could not possibly channel it without stop. Thus, the main power of the offensive still fell on Lu Sanbian, Meng Feiqing, and the others. Ling Han's primary role was to see which one of them was in danger, and then he would rush forwards to help them block the enemy attacks. Of course, his battle prowess should not be underestimated, either. Using Fists of Fury, he could pose a very great threat to Kuhad. After all, the latter's eyes, as well as the openings in between his outer shell, were not protected. Kuhad's fury was uncontrollable. It was clear that his strength was superior, and any one of Lu Sanbian and the others could not be a match for him. Yet because of Ling Han, the others could unleash their full battle prowess. Thankfully for him, because the power of regulation of Lu Sanbian and the others was almost fully expended, Kuhad still had the upper hand in the battle. Though I have to expend a bit more effort, all of you will still have to die. He released a cruel laugh. These people were all extremely outstanding members of the younger generation of the celestial realm. He could deal with over a dozen of them in one stroke, and this could be considered as having accomplished quite a military merit, especially when there was still the Origin magic cube here. Though he spoke of it disdainfully, he actually treasured it greatly. Was pseudo-heavenly venerable tier not awesome enough? The circumstances of Lu Sanbian and the others was getting worse and worse. Though they had drummed up their remaining power, willpower was not everything. Once power of regulation was exhausted, it was exhausted. Pum! The thigh of the 7th tiger of the 9 tigers of Chang clan was pierced through by Kuhad's attack, and he released a pained yell. His whole person was still nailed by the insect limb, and moved up and down and right and left following Kuhad's movements. Shwa! Kuhad flicked his insect leg, and the 7th tiger was sent flying. His lower half directly exploded, and his vitality immediately declined several hundred times over. Ling Han's ability was also limited. He could not possibly channel the indestructible heavens scroll endlessly. This time when the 7th tiger of the Chang clan being severely wounded was a time when he could do nothing. 7th! The other 8 tigers of the Chang clan all exclaimed in shock. This time, Seventh had definitely suffered a severe blow. Even if he managed to survive this, his strength would also decline greatly. The 9 of them were one and the same, and once there was a weak point, their battle prowess as a whole would be weakened as well. Ha ha ha. Kahad laughed loudly. Now that the 7th tiger had suffered a heavy injury, it was equivalent to having weakened the strength of the other 8 tigers, allowing him to find an opening. His 6 legs danced widely, blazing with killing intent. Ling Han had his hands full. The strength of the 9 tigers had instantly dropped from the level of a 5th secret monarch tier, and all of them had become a paper basket that could be easily pierced through, so he could only choose to give up on them. He could not manage to save all of them, and if he did try, it would only drag himself in as well. Pung, pung, pung. The remaining 8 tigers of the Chang clan were all sent flying endlessly, blood splattering. Some were fortunate and were only missing limbs, while some had directly been destroyed, with both their form and spirit eradicated. Thi was a competition for a rare treasure, and was also a war with the foreign realm. It was inevitable that there would be bloodshed and sacrifice. The 9 tigers of the Chang clan were all grieving greatly. They had never thought that this trip would actually result in the 9 brothers being separated in life and death. Kuhad's attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Not long after, Lu Sanbian had also been severely wounded, half of his body forcibly severed. Not only were his internal organs exposed, even his brain was revealed, and his mind had almost been pierced right through. Trash will always be trash. Kahad was now completely at an advantage. His eyes were fixed on Meng Feiqing. This was the last powerful opponent. Pooh! He clawed out, and the attack landed on Meng Feiqing's chest, completely crumbling the latter's power. Then a long pipe was actually spat out from his mouth, which then sank into Meng Feiqing's forehead. With a hiss, he sucked, and Meng Feiqing's head quickly deflated. The brain juices of a prodigy are indeed delicious. Kahad smacked his lips, appearing not to have been fully satisfied. This was really too cruel. You all belong to Kahad, this insect declared, charging to attack Lu Sanbian again. He had not eaten enough of the latter's brain juices. Ling Han was also enraged by now. Though he also consumed beast meat, such actions of Kahad had already broken through his tolerance limits. He moved in a furious rage, sending out a barrage of blows. Chapter 2243. Dripping water penetrates stone. Chapter 2243. Dripping water penetrates stone. Kuhad merely twisted his body slightly, using the incredibly tough outer shell to defend against Ling Han's attack. Meanwhile, he had set his eyes on Lu Sanbian, intending to kill the latter. Lu Sanbian used all the tricks up his sleeve, yet was ultimately rendered completely helpless. His body was pinned down by Kahad, and his brain juices were sucked dry. Delicious, really too delicious. Kahad laughed loudly. After consuming several more of such prodigies, Kahad will very soon be able to reach the 6th level of 8th Lotus. He continued to move, and this time his target was the 9 tigers of the Chang clan. The 9 tigers of the Chang clan had already stowed the bodies of those brothers that had died in battle into their spatial god tool, and now there were 5 left that were still standing, but faced with Kahad, there was no way that they could resist. Very soon, they were all killed, and their spatial god tools had also been broken, pouring out countless spatial god tools, as well as the corpses of the other 4 tigers. Kuhad sucked dry the brain juices of all 9 tigers and passed judgment. As expected, it is still the brain juices of a living person that are more delicious. The taste of the dead is slightly inferior. His eyes set on Ling Han. Though you are the weakest, your aptitude is the highest, so Kuhad left you for last. Ling Han took a deep breath, setting aside all his negative emotions. He fixed his eyes on Kahad and declared, "If I do not kill you, then my surname is not Ling." "Haha, how are you going to kill me?" Kohad pointed at the corpses of Meng Feiqing and the others. You tried your utmost to save them, but in the end, they have still become my food and fertilizer. You can save no one, and that includes yourself. Your fate is to become Kohad's food. His 6 limbs danced in the air and shot towards Ling Han. Meanwhile, Ling Han used void space. Though Kohad had flaunted his might, killing what was equivalent to 3 fifth secret monarch tears, how could that not have come with a price his power of regulation had been expended greatly? Thus, Ling Han merely had to expend a little more of the other's power, and he would then be able to counterattack. Haha, you think you can exhaust Kohad's power? Too naive. Kohad laughed loudly. How could you possibly imagine the power of our shadow race? Even if you exhaust your power of regulation 10 times over, I will still be full of energy, my battle prowess unreduced. Is that so? Ling Han asked coldly. Though Lu Sanbian and the others had all already died in battle, leaving the battle prowess of his side considerably weakened, there was also no longer any need for him to be concerned about others now, and his concentration was fully freed. Then let us just see who would tire the other out first. Ling Han did not speak further, and merely focused on fighting Kohad. His primary focus was evasion and dodging, so his expense of power of regulation was naturally very small. Kohad's primary focus was attack, yet he was still carelessly expending his power of regulation, as if it was just like he had said, and the regulations that were locked in his body were boundless, far surpassing the level of 5th secret. Fight, 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 fight. True enough, there was absolutely no sign of Kohad's battle prowess declining, which was incredibly terrifying. However, Kohad's heart was not as steady as it had once been. That was because, though Ling Han was on the defensive, there was really too much power of regulation that he could channel out. Was this really a first secret? Moreover, Kohad's battle prowess was also about to reach a turning point. His regulations were close to exhaustion, and he was quickly about to go on the decline. His brow creased in a frown, and he abandoned Ling Han. Instead, he directly pounced towards the origin magic cube. Ling Han humphed coldly, setting off in rapid pursuit. With him shooting out a fist, Sword Qi danced wildly, slashing out towards the openings in Kohad's outer shell. You've fallen for it. Kohad did not even need to turn around. His insect leg swept out, stabbing out at Ling Han so fast that it was like a shooting star. He knew that Ling Han would definitely stop him from retrieving the origin magic cube. Thus, he put on an act of being about to retrieve the origin magic cube, while in truth he was actually luring Ling Han into moving to stop him, intending to take advantage of the opening to sneak attack the latter and kill him. Ling Han smiled calmly, a supreme aura surging over his body. Immediately, his body turned golden as multiple veined patterns flowed out, as if he was a divine being. Pum! This blow landed on Ling Han's body, yet had only pushed him backwards. However, a few slivers of Sword Qi had still slashed into the openings of Kohad's outer shell. Jade-green blood gushed out, and Kohad wore an expression of outrage. His initial intentions had been to ambush Ling Han and kill him. He had not expected that he would be wounded by Ling Han instead, which naturally made him feel incredibly furious. Die! 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 He roared loudly, his insect legs waving madly, and sending out a terrifying attack after terrifying attack. Ling Han dealt with each attack as it came, and merely focused on evasion. If he really could not manage to dodge, he still had the indestructible Heaven Scroll. If it was only him alone, he was really nimble and agile. After battling for a few more hours, Kohad was finally anxious. His power of regulation was already seriously insufficient, and his battle prowess was beginning to rapidly decline. Isn't your power of regulation endless? Ling Han countered, sending out a punch. Pum! With a mere tremor, he neutralized an attack from Kohad. Kohad really wanted to curse. Because of a difference in race, the power of regulations locked in his body was definitely several times more than that of any cultivator of the same level in the celestial realm. Thus, while he clearly had battled intensely with Lu Sanbian and the others, he was still filled with confidence, certain that he could kill Ling Han as well. However, the result was completely the opposite. The storage of regulations of this first secret cultivator was actually superior to even his. How could this be believed? Gritting his teeth, he charged towards the Origin magic cube. Previously, he had laid out a deadly trap for Ling Han, but he was really planning to snatch the Origin magic cube and flee this time. After refining the Origin magic cube, his battle prowess would definitively be raised to a terrifying level. By that time, to say nothing of a minor character like Ling Han, he would be certain of killing the majority of Ninth Heaven celestial kings. This treasure was something that could help one become a supreme elite in a single leap. Ling Han sniped at him, the fists of fury shooting out in quick succession. Pung, pung, pung. Just like drops of rain, they landed on Kahad's outer shell. Pointless effort. Kahad smirked coldly. His outer shell was extremely hard. Though it could not compare to 5-star pseudo-divine metal, it was definitely not something that a first secret cultivator could pierce through with his bare fists. Ling Han did not answer, and merely shot out a series of punches madly. His stamina had already advanced into the level of an ascending origin tier, so the speed of his blows was astonishingly quick. Furthermore, every punch was landing on the same spot. Kuhad felt as if he had lost all face, actually being forced to flee by what, in his eyes, was trash of the lowest grade. Thankfully, no one witnessed the scene. He only had to kill Ling Han, and there would be no need for him to worry that this embarrassment would be known to others. He only lowered his head and charged towards the Origin magic cube. Once he obtained this rare treasure, he would be able to become an 18th Lotus Elite not too long after, in other words, a Ninth Heaven celestial king. Just blast me as you like. In any case, there is absolutely no way that you can penetrate my outer shell. Crack! A crisp crack rang out. Kohad felt a tremor pass through his body, and the latter actually became unsteady. Looking over, his eyes instantly turned green. That was because one of his legs had been torn from the force, and only a sliver of blood and flesh was still connected to it. It was hanging from his body, swaying back and forth. He couldn't help but feel incredibly astounded. Ling Han had actually truly managed to pierce his outer shell with his bare hands. Just what kind of monster was this? Ling Han sent out another punch, hitting the spot where the leg had been torn, and asked calmly, "Could it be that you have never heard the words, 'Dripping stone penetrates stone'?" The power of dripping water was indeed negligible, but with enough time it could actually pierce a hole in the hard rock. Ling Han did not have that much time, but he could use the speed of his attacks to compensate for that. Moreover, his attack was much stronger than dripping water. Blood was dripping from his hand. That was his own blood, but his godly bones were undamaged. His vitality was burning to the maximum as a boundless killing intent flickered in his eyes. Chapter 2244, Killing Kahad. Chapter 2244, Killing Kahad. Ah! Kahad released a pained wail. Though his outer shell was hard, there was not much difference between his insides and the insides of any cultivator of the celestial realm. This fist pummeled in through the point of severance, and regulation of slaughter assaulted, instantly crushing his blood and flesh into mush, eliminating all life. Finally, he was afraid because he could feel the incredibly powerful approach of death in this instant. However, he naturally could not possibly beg to be spared. Who in the two realms did not know that they would either kill or be killed when they encountered the opposing side? There was only one side that could survive. There was no sympathy, no pity. There were only battle and slaughter. Ling Han's expression was dark. He thought of how terribly Lu Sanbian, Meng Feiqing, and the others had died. Even if Kahad had not killed them, these people would possibly have died in his hands anyway. However, As another member of the celestial realm, he could not tolerate his own people dying from having their brain juices sucked out. This kind of scene streaked through his mind, causing his killing intent to blaze, and he was filled with brutality. He was going to start a massacre. Trash of the super low-level dimension. Kuhad roared in defiance. As he saw it, Ling Han's cultivation level was pitifully low, and he definitely should not have the ability to threaten him. Yet now it was possible that he would be killed by this kind of existence. He truly could not reconcile himself to that. However, so what if he was furious or irreconcilable? In a battle of cultivators, everything would depend on strength. Only in circumstances when strength was equal on both sides would other factors like determination take effect. Pung, pung, pung. Ling Han struck without mercy, every blow landing on the wound that he had previously torn open, delivering a harsh blow on Kuhad. Die! Ling Han roared in fury, focusing all his rage and power in this one punch. Pung! Kuhad's whole body had inflated. His compound eyes visibly exploded at the same time, his life completely erased. Ling Han stretched out a hand in a grab and stowed Kuhad's corpse into the Black Tower. After some thought, he stowed the corpses of Lu Sanbian and the others as well. Then he looked towards the Origin Magic Cube. The countless tiny cubes were channeling endlessly, with every tiny cube having a single eye that made up a gigantic eye. Because the tiny cubes were endlessly channeling, it made it seem like this huge eye was blinking. Ling Han immediately thought of the first time his divine sense entered underground, where he was peered at by an eye. After slight recollection, he discovered that the two were one and the same. Small tower, how can I retrieve this thing? He asked. Tisk TSK TSK. This is a core of the heaven and earth, source of all techniques. Small tower exclaimed with a TSK. There is really no denying your good luck, brat. When the heavenly venerate reigned supreme, he had not yet obtained a single core of the heaven and earth. Though this can only be considered a false core of heaven and earth, it is still a supreme stroke of good fortune. Ling Han sighed and said, Hey, if I cannot retrieve it, everything else is useless. Just treat it like any treasure and retrieve it directly, Small Tower said carelessly. Though the Origin Magic Cube is the core of the heaven and earth, it itself does not have much power. That is why it required the protection of that great beast. Realization dawned on Ling Han. No wonder that great beast was so strong that it surpassed the limits of regulations of this world. That was because it was protecting the evolution of this world, and naturally had to possess power that was above standards. Unfortunately, the heaven and earth had created regulations, and once regulations were formed, they would channel with absolute fairness, and even the heaven and earth could do nothing about that. Unless he could obtain this Origin Magic Cube, it would have initially disappeared after the world had developed and created a system with the channeling of regulations. However, this world was created from the clash of two realms, and innumerable elites had surged in. Otherwise, if it had been the creation of a genuine world, how could it possibly have been disturbed by anyone? Ling Han walked over. Wang, he took a step forwards, yet the Origin Magic Cube retreated endlessly, turning into a tiny regulations of time, regulations of space. Ling Han appeared, slightly stunned. Wasn't it said that the Origin Magic Cube was equivalent to a treasure? Do not be deceived by external factors and listen to your own heart, Small Tower said. Ling Han nodded. Closing his eyes, he used his heart as his eyes. Instantly, he discovered that his eyes had indeed deceived him. That was because the Origin Magic Cube was clearly still in its original location and had not appeared in the boundless distance at all. Ling Han continued to walk over. Then there were multiple random thoughts in his mind, wanting to distract him. There were strong enemies charging towards him, exquisitely beautiful women trying to lure him away, and scenes of the heaven and earth crumbling like the world was ending. But Ling Han merely kept his heart focused. unmoved by any external factors. Around 100 steps later, he finally arrived in front of the Origin Magic Cube. He stretched out his hand and placed his hand on the Origin Magic Cube. Immediately, a sudden change took place. The cube abruptly enlarged, and even more tiny cubes appeared. In just that one instant, it had become larger than any star. No, every tiny cube itself was a star. The only difference was that the stars were spherical, while this was a cube. Ling Han had an enlightenment. All the stars had been split out from the Origin Magic Cube. However, in the next instant, the Origin Magic Cube shrank endlessly, becoming smaller than even a cell, but it was still made up of innumerable tiny cubes. The size could be decided by will and could be changed endlessly. This was the most central core of source power of the heaven and earth, and it could be seen as a seed. Naturally, it was pitifully tiny, but as the seed grew, it could grow into a completely new world. As Ling Han used his heart to sense it, he released his own divine sense, which entered so that the Origin Magic Cube would recognize him as its master. The Origin Magic Cube again turned from an extremely small size to an extremely huge size, enveloping Ling Han completely. Then it did not change any further and was as silent as the dead. However, within the Origin Magic Cube, there was a world-shaking change taking place. Innumerable regulations were surging into Ling Han's body, but their height far surpassed Ling Han's level, causing him an agonizing migraine. His physical body crumbled instantly, leaving behind only blood essence and his life force flowing. Meanwhile, his divine sense had merged with the Origin Magic Cube. Without the limitations of a physical body, his divine sense was also freed instantly, endlessly absorbing the ocean of regulations that the Origin Magic Cube was transmitting to him. Boom! A great, turmoil-like change took place in the entire neutral zone. Everyone had been expelled. Only those that had power that was even higher than ascending origin tier could enter forcefully. But if this kind of existence entered, they would be targeted by the heaven and earth, and directly crushed into dust. Hence, this was an irresolvable issue. No one disturbed Ling Han. Time passed quickly. 10 years, 100 years, and 1,000 years passed rapidly. 1,400 years later, a great change finally took place again in this neutral zone. It no longer expelled outsiders. Thus, whether it was the foreign realm or the celestial realm, they all sent a great number of immortal palastiers inside. They wanted to find the truth behind the great change that had taken place 1,400 years ago. Of course, the celestial kings had also spoken of some secrets, saying that it was possible that a precious treasure of heaven and earth had come into being in the neutral zone. Hence, these people had another mission, and that was to find this precious treasure if it existed. Several years later, the Origin Magic Cube had finally been found, and it was not just by a single group either, but rather 7 groups, consisting of both celestial realm and foreign realm, which led to a great battle, dragging all the forces of the 2 great realms into this conflict. Because it was still only the immortal palastier that could enter, neither side had a superpower that could decide things one and for all, which led to an incredibly intense and tightly fought conflict. Neither side could overwhelm the other. Most importantly, the monarch star-level powerhouses of both sides had not been mobilized. Chapter 2245, Appearance of Monarch Stars. Chapter 2245, Appearance of Monarch Stars. At least on the side of the celestial realm, Ji Wuming, Hong Huang, Alien, Xing Qinyue, and the other monarch stars were all in seclusion at a mysterious location. It was rumored that there were mighty figures that were presently nurturing them to the best of their efforts. The moment they appeared, their strength would definitely shock the world. Perhaps it was the same for the side of the foreign realm. But without the appearance of monarch stars, this battle would simply continue intensely and would not be leaning towards either side. All in all, it was indeed the foreign realm that was stronger, but in this neutral zone, their advantage had been greatly limited. Boom! 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 The battle was incredibly intense. No, this was a war that had broken out for the sake of the Origin Magic Cube. And within the Origin Magic Cube, Ling Han suddenly awoke. In these 1,000-odd years, he had maintained a muddle-headed state while barraged by the endless regulations within the Origin Magic Cube, just passively sustaining the barrage. Aside from that, there were also techniques used to control this Origin Magic Cube to channel this world. And now he had finally received all the information. With a thought, boom, a fiery flame burned, and his body was immediately reformed. His naked body was exuding a wide, broad life essence like a smoke signal. This world belonged to him. This was a feeling that could not be described. The whole neutral zone was under his control. With only a single thought from him, the heavens would crumble and earth would crack at his will. He was the overlord of the entire world. In this place, he needed not worry any further about the problem of running out of regulations. In fact, he did not even need the regulations to replenish him, because he was the overlord of this world, and was superior to even regulations. Then what did he need regulations for anymore? Would I be able to kill ninth heaven's celestial kings, know if the latter entered into this world? Ling Han thought, this world could reach the height of the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, which also meant that the upper limits of his power should also be pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Since it was connected to the heavenly venerable tier, it definitely had to be superior to the ninth heaven celestial king tier. They weren't even on the same level. However, if those ninth heaven celestial kings of the foreign realm, the 18th Lotus elites, knew that I have gained the Origin Magic Cube, they would definitely not dare to step into this space, or would even ask a heavenly venerate to interfere directly to destroy this world. Then, not only would I be unable to kill the foreign realm elites, it would also be a great loss, Ling Han thought. He was presently the overlord of this world, and could endlessly extract the power of heaven and earth for his own use. This rate of progress was astonishingly rapid. In fact, he could set regulations himself, and did not have to go to any mystery realm at all to directly increase his cultivation level. Even the heaven and earth listened to his say, so cultivation was naturally a piece of cake. No, he immediately shook his head. The cultivation he gained in this world would only be suitable for this world. Otherwise, the heaven and earth of the celestial realm would not recognize it at all, and could even possibly target him. Too bad. Ling Han shook his head. However, if I plan properly, who knows, I might be able to kill a great many foreign realm elites through trickery, and by then the military merit I would be earning would be astonishingly great. In Clear Heaven Pass, in the resistance against the foreign realm elites, military merits would be allocated after each battle, especially after killing foreign realm elites. That military merit would be astonishingly huge. This military merit was not determined by someone, but rather by the heavens itself. The heaven and earth had consciousness, or how could there be regulations? Previously, it had advanced the descent of Dragon's Gate Mountain, and that was the heaven and earth trying to save itself. Military merits could be used to trade for cultivation resources, but the most valuable was access to the reincarnation gates. It would allow a cultivator to reincarnate and come back to life, but this required great military merits and would grant a cultivator a chance to start back from the beginning. If Ling Han killed an 18th Lotus elite, then could he trade that for enough godly metal so that he could advance the divine demon sword to the level of a celestial tool from the heavens? Furthermore, if his luck was good, it was not just one 18th Lotus elite that he could kill through trickery. Thus, with a thought, Xiao, the Origin Magic Cube, immediately moved and turned into a streak of light that disappeared without a trace in an instant. Where is the core of heaven and earth? Everyone was battling fiercely, and when they saw the Origin Magic Cube suddenly vanish, they were all stunned and involuntarily ceased fighting. The treasure was gone, so what was the point of continuing to fight? Who did it? Someone asked, flustered and exasperated. It must be those monsters of the foreign realm. It was you, Trash. Both sides were blaming each other, both thinking that it was the other side that had done something and caused the origin magic cube to disappear. Wang, a frightening aura surged over and a figure appeared. It was a human-shaped creature, but had the hooves of a cow and the wings of a bat, with a long tail trailing behind him. There was a single horn sprouting from his head, and his skin was crimson red. Gadolin. When they saw this person, everyone on the foreign realm side cheered, as if he was a supreme celestial king. Gadolin's eyes swept over them, his gaze incredibly sharp and filled with endless intimidation. The cultivators of the celestial realm felt like they were about to explode just from this one glance from him. What kind of person was this? He was too powerful. Die. A prodigy of the celestial realm moved and grabbed out at Gadolin. He was a fifth secret monarch tier, a native of Clear Heaven Pass, and a descendant of an eighth heaven celestial king. Gadolin merely regarded him coldly, and when that prodigy of the celestial realm had neared, he finally moved. His movements were not really very fast, but just by raising his hand, he made that celestial realm prodigy's neck fall into his grasp. Ka! A crisp crack rang out, and the neck of the celestial realm prodigy was already broken, all life instantly erased from him. Insta-kill. A fifth secret monarch tier had actually been insta-killed. How is this possible? Those celestial realm cultivators on the scene were all stunned. Theoretically speaking, a fifth secret monarch tier should be the strongest force here. True, there were still differences in strength among fifth secret monarch tiers, but it was absolutely impossible that the gap could be so far as to result in an insta-kill. Monarch. Monarch star. Someone exclaimed in a trembling voice. Finally, a monarch star had appeared. This was an existence that surpassed the monarch tier. Someone unimaginably powerful. It was said that it was certain that they could become ninth heaven celestial kings and had supreme aptitude. The foreign realm had mobilized a monarch star, and it would completely alter the scales of victory in this war. Gadolin. The cultivators of the foreign realm all cheered and yelled, extremely overcome with excitement. But Gadolin did not look the slightest bit proud. As he saw it, wasn't it just a matter of course to insta-kill a fifth secret monarch tier? What need was there for such fuss? He merely swept a glance over them and asked, "Where is the origin magic cube?" "It has been retrieved through some unknown means by these weaklings of the celestial realm," a foreign realm elite answered. "Nonsense! It is clearly you all that stole it," the cultivators of the celestial realm immediately retorted. Gadolin smirked coldly, exuding a supreme air of eerie coldness. Instantly, everyone fell silent, feeling a sudden chill arise and feeling indescribably uncomfortable. He stated calmly, "At first, I would not even deign to kill such trash like you guys, but you have hidden the origin magic cube. That is just courting death." Pum! With a flash of his figure, he instantly turned into several hundred afterimages. Pa, 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 pa. In only that one instant, several hundred immortal palace tiers of the celestial realm were slaughtered. There were excellent students that came from the Saintly Origin Academy among them, as well as prodigies among the natives, but most of them were immortal palace tiers from the various great forces of Clear Heaven Pass. With such a massacre, everyone from the celestial realm felt it difficult to swallow. Too powerful. They, too, were immortal palace tiers, so why was there such a huge difference? Who would be able to withstand a bringer of slaughter like this? It was probable that he alone would be able to kill all the celestial realm elites here. "You dare to touch those of our celestial realm. Are you tired of living?" An incredibly proud voice rang out, and a figure was seen streaking forth from afar at an astonishing speed. Chapter 2246. A Helping Hand. Chapter 2246. A Helping Hand. This was a very young man who had clear-cut features, and was filled with an air of robust heroism. His attire was plain, merely ordinary blue long robes, yet he naturally had an air that could make others fall into submission before him. At first, he had still been in the distance, but in the time needed for a mere few blinks of the eye, he had already arrived within the proximity. Alien! The members of the celestial realm faltered for a moment before looking excited as they cheered loudly. Alien, a monarch star of the celestial realm. He was rumored to have advanced into the immortal palace tier at a far earlier time than Ji-Wuming and the others. Gadolin's eyes swept over him, looking slightly serious. There was a mysterious feeling that elites would have about other elites. Alien made him instinctively sense that the former was very strong. However, what was stronger was his confidence and contempt. Coward! So you have finally dared to appear for a battle. Hee, killing you would be as easy as killing a dog. What need is there for such arrogance? Alien stated calmly, and even flicked the corners of his robes, as if the other was merely a speck of dust that was completely beneath his notice. How dare you? The people of the foreign realm all shouted loudly. Gadolin merely smiled. Do you only know how to boast? Then make your move, and I will let you know what the immensity of heaven and earth means. Alien declared, I will oblige you. Gadolin moved decisively. Shio, before everyone's eyes could catch sight of him, he had already charged in front of Alien and shot out a punch. Instantly, the heaven and earth seemed to lose all color, as if about to prostrate in front of him. Pum! Alien also responded with a punch of his own. The two fists had not yet collided when the power of regulation wrapped around their fists had already clashed, creating a boundlessly majestic light, which was like a sun and could be seen from 500 km away. Usually, after trading a blow, both sides would step back and then find another chance for attack. However, neither of them had any intention to withdraw their fists at all. Instead, they pushed their fists onwards towards the other. Both were very fast, but every step they took would create a loud sound like thunder, and those people below who were beneath the immortal palace tier were completely dizzy from it. Too strong, so this was monarch stars. Finally, the two fists slowly crashed towards one another. At this moment, an even more brilliant light burst out, as if the universe had exploded. Even though everyone had their eyes open, it was like they were blind, and they could not see anything at all. After a long while, the light finally dimmed, and Alien and Gadolin were revealed to be standing 30 meters away from each other. Both of them had crossed their arms behind their backs and made no further movement. Everyone was astonished. Just now, they had not been able to see anything at all, and their divine sense had also been blocked. If either Alien or Gadolin had made a move to attack them, they would not even have known how they had died. A slight breeze blew over, and the robes of the two great monarch stars fluttered slightly. So you have cultivated to the 8th level of 8th Lotus. Not bad, not bad. Gadolin spoke up, not withholding his praise of Alien. Alien similarly very calmly answered, We are both in the same boat. 8th level of 8th Lotus. What cultivation level was that equivalent to? Most people were completely baffled, but some descendants and heirs of 8th heaven and 9th heaven, celestial kings, understood. The 5th level of 8th Lotus corresponded to the 5th secret of the immortal palace tier, and from the 6th level onwards, it corresponded to the 6th secret palace. This was the pinnacle level of the immortal palace tier, and there were pitifully few that could cultivate to this level. Furthermore, at least more than half would only be able to cultivate to the 6th secret and 7th secret. The number that could complete the pinnacle level 11th secret could be counted on one hand. Monarch stars were monarch stars after all. They could reach the pinnacle level of every cultivation level, and others could only envy them. However, I will not need 100 moves to kill you, Gadolin declared calmly, filled with confidence. Firstly, the overall level of our dimension is higher than yours. In a battle of equal levels, I will be able to overwhelm any one of you. Secondly, there are no regulations here that you can draw replenishment from, but I have originated from a stronger dimension. In a situation where regulations are equal, my battle prowess will be stronger. You can just boast as you like, Aeolian said disdainfully. I only decide with my fists. Ha ha, then I shall send you on your way to the afterlife. Gadolin charged out again, multiple seals glowing on his crimson red skin. He had entered his strongest state. Pum, pum, pum. Aeolian was unafraid. He, too, used celestial techniques, and his whole person had become a ball of moving water. Every drop was as heavy as a star, and was capable of destroying everything. Water was the gentlest, but was also the toughest. Aeolian's grasp of regulation of water had clearly reached an astonishing extent. Thousands of drops of water traversed space, which was incredibly terrifying. Neither of the great monarch stars had any intention of dragging out the battle. They merely blasted at each other. 100 moves, 200 moves, 300 moves. The speed of their blows was just too high, and various amazing techniques were pouring out, such that others could only exclaim in shock. Everyone was gasping in amazement, and even those from the foreign realm could not help but be impressed by alien strength. This was indeed an amazing character. If he could go and develop further at the foreign realm, his future prospects would be boundless. Though the rare Earth dimension was also a low-level dimension, its level was superior to the celestial realms. Being able to cultivate his battle prowess to such a frightening level in this kind of barren and impoverished place, if he went to the rare Earth dimension, where power of regulation was even stronger, his strength would naturally be able to progress further. In fact, it could even be claimed that Gadolin was actually inferior to Aeolian. But who asked him to be born in the celestial realm? This had limited his potential and strength. Though the two great monarch stars had been boasting at the beginning, in truth, their strength was actually extremely close. The battle was not decided even after 700 moves. However, their clash was really too intense, causing a great expense of the power of regulation within their bodies, and both were beginning to look strained. Gadolin, he is merely trash from a super low-level dimension. You still haven't managed to deal with him after so long? A voice rang out slowly, and a large, fat figure suddenly appeared. What was this thing? A fat insect, looking like a worm and 30 meters long, while its width was about 12 meters and possessing a large number of tiny white legs, appeared. Its head had 2 massive eyes that were incredibly beautiful, like crystals. Gadolin's fist suddenly shook, sending Aeolian back. Then he turned his head and glanced, asking, "Yamu, what are you doing here?" "Lady Yamu." Seeing this gigantic worm, at least half the people of the foreign realm knelt on one knee, paying their respects to it. Yamu, that giant insect, smirked coldly. Upon closer look, it actually possessed extremely feminine expressions, and the mental voice it emanated was also inclining towards femininity. This should be a female insect. Her many legs moved simultaneously as her body wriggled forwards. With every sweep of a leg, she would be advancing at least several 100 kilometers. Her movements zigzagged and pained cries rang out. She had actually charged right into the crowds, and wherever she passed, she would actually be swallowing multiple members of the celestial realm. After she had devoured several dozen people, she finally answered, "You are too inefficient. I have come to replace you." Gadolin was furious and exclaimed, "I can deal with it. There is no need for your nosiness." "Is that right?" Yamu's eyes became fixed on Aeolian. "This human is not bad. I want to eat him." Meanwhile, Aeolian's expression was solemn. This female bug was a monarch star that was in no way inferior to Gadolin. If they were battling outside, then even if he was outmatched, he would not have to worry about any threat to his life. But in this place, the power of regulation in his body was already close to running out, but Yamu was completely energized. If they battled, his circumstances would become extremely dangerous. But how could it be that he had to surrender the Origin magic cube and flee on his own, abandoning the many people that were still here? Every person of the celestial realm had a solemn expression as well. They naturally could tell just how dangerous their situation was. 2 monarch stars had actually come from the foreign realm. "Brother AI, do you need a helping hand?" Right at this moment, a voice rang out, and a masked person appeared quietly. Chapter 2247, Chicken Slayer. Chapter 2247, Chicken Slayer. Only after flying far away on the Origin Magic Cube did Ling Han have time to appreciate and try out this new toy. This was indeed a new toy. Using the Origin Magic Cube, he could control this entire heaven and earth. If he so desired, the Origin Magic Cube would continue to evolve in this heaven and earth, eventually forming a new world, one which could birth all kinds of life forms. However, this region lay between the 2 realms, in the location of the 2-realm battlefield. Thus, once it completed its evolution and thoroughly realized its existence, the commencement of battle between the 2 realms would most certainly rain death and destruction upon the beings that inhabited it. Because this heaven and earth was far too low in level, with a core only equivalent to the level of a pseudo-heavenly venerate, it was only natural that the most powerful being of this heaven and earth could only reach this level at the maximum as well. Thus, their only fate would be to become cannon fodder on the battlefield. After becoming familiar with this giant toy, Ling Han still needed to spend a long time to finally gain some insight into it. He unleashed his divine sense, causing the entire neutral zone to become his eyes. He was the ruler of this realm. He could see the 2 monarch stars from the rare Earth realm who were currently threatening the lives of everyone in the celestial realm. If Ling Han wished, he could even kill Gadolin and Yamu with a single thought. However, doing so would allow the celestial kings of the foreign realm to easily determine that the Origin Magic Cube was in his hands. At that time, when a heavenly venerate of the foreign realm attacked, this realm would be completely incapable of withstanding his wrath. Its only fate would be transforming into nothingness. Of course, a heavenly venerate of the foreign realm wouldn't attack so rashly. This was because destroying this realm risked destabilizing the connection point between the 2 realms, in turn affecting their advance. Why didn't the heavenly venerates of the celestial realm interfere in this matter? If they seized the opportunity to destroy this realm, wouldn't that hinder the assault of the foreign realm? At the very least, couldn't they buy more time? Well, this was a question for them. A stroke of realization flashed through Ling Han's mind. No wonder the large black dog viewed the sealed emotion, heavenly venerable, with such contempt and disdain. They were far too passive when it came to dealing with the invasion of the foreign realm. Ling Han naturally couldn't stand by idly while his allies from the celestial realm were killed. With a single thought, he immediately teleported to the battlefield. However, he still needed to cause some trouble for the celestial kings of the foreign realm. He would kill at least 12 or 24 of their celestial kings. Of course, he naturally couldn't display too much of his power, or else he risked exposing his secrets. Alien was slightly surprised because he didn't recognize Ling Han at all. "How may I refer to you, friend?" he asked. Gadolin and Yamu were both monarch stars, and their cultivation levels had more so surpassed the 5th secret. Their battle prowess was simply unfathomable. Meanwhile, there were only a handful of immortal palace tier monarch stars in the celestial realm. Apart from Ling Han, there was only Xing Chenyue, Ji Wuming, and 2 other people. However, Ji Wuming and the others were still receiving special training from the celestial kings, and they were aiming to surpass the 5th secret in the shortest time possible. Otherwise, they would be too weak to fight against the immortal palace tier monarch stars from the foreign realm. Xing Chenyue, Alien thought to himself. However, she was female, while this masked person was clearly male. Moreover, she was cultivating toward the 10th secret, so she definitely wouldn't halt her cultivation to suddenly come here. Right now, Alien's instinct was telling him that this masked person's battle prowess was no weaker than his. Strange. Who in the world is he? Ling Han smiled and replied, "I'm a chicken slayer." Chicken slayer. Everyone grimaced upon hearing this. What kind of name was this? However, he was from the celestial realm, so the chickens that he wanted to slaughter were naturally the cultivators from the foreign realm. Haha! This was a blatant show of contempt for the foreign realm. Many people instantly chuckled upon hearing this. Shameless boast, Yamu said in a menacing voice. Her 100 feet danced, and she was already charging toward Ling Han. Whoosh! She was clearly skilled with the regulations of space, and the space surrounding her instantly transformed into rippling waves, allowing her to travel through them as she pleased. Her speed was astonishing, and she already appeared before Ling Han in an instant. With her mouth agape, she bit down on the masked figure. This was no simple bite. Instead, it was one that had drawn on the regulations of space. Her gaping maw transformed into an independent space, one from which escape was impossible. Ling Han smiled as he threw a punch. Pung! The onlookers could only see a flash of white, yet Yamu had already been violently smashed back and sent flying. Pung! 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 She obliterated thousands of celestial bodies before finally coming to a stop. Those of a lower cultivation level were already unable to see Yamu's whereabouts. Only those at the Immortal Palace tier could faintly discern her figure at an extremely distant location. This was a gigantic insect whose body was bathed in green blood. Her state was as miserable as could be. At this instant, everyone was transfixed with shock. They couldn't utter a single word. Yamu was a monarch star, equaling an 8th secret cultivator. Yet she had actually been sent flying with a single punch? Who could believe this? Even Alien and Gadolin hadn't expected such a situation. Cold sweat instantly trickled down their backs. Far too powerful. This person was truly far too powerful. Whoosh! There was a flash of white as Yamu charged back. She was skilled with the regulations of space, so a distance of hundreds of millions of kilometers was but an inch to her. She glared at Ling Han, and there was a strong sense of apprehension in her eyes. Even if she had underestimated Ling Han before, and even though she had been careless with her attack, it was ultimately because Ling Han was far more powerful than her that he had been able to send her flying with a single punch. 10th layer of the 8th lotus, Gadolin said in a solemn and deeply apprehensive voice. 10th secret. Alien also spoke. He was more so feeling a sense of confusion. He could clearly sense that Ling Han's strength was similar to his. So how had the other party suddenly become a 10th secret elite? This transformation was far too great. Ling Han smiled with composure. To say nothing of the 10th secret, if he wanted to, he could even launch an attack rivaling the power of a pseudo-heavenly venerate. He could kill a 9th heaven celestial king with ease. Do you people believe me now? That I'm a chicken slayer? Fury instantly spread across the faces of the cultivators from the foreign realm. Were they weak and frail chickens? No. They were invaders. They were elites. Yet they were actually being referred to as helpless chickens now. This naturally caused them to feel great humiliation. 10th layer of the 8th lotus is indeed powerful. However, we aren't short of such elites, either. Gadolin said in a calm voice. They could lose a soldier, but they couldn't lose their morale. The might of the foreign realm couldn't be lost because of them. They had obtained a crushing advantage at both the severing mundane tier and the dividing soul tier. This Wooden Tand couldn't be any different at the Immortal Palace tier. That's right. Sun Luo, 10th layer of the 8th lotus. Nai Yu, 10th layer of the 8th lotus. Wu Xian, 10th layer of the 8th lotus. Qi Shui, 11th layer of the 8th lotus. Gadolin and Yamu called out the names and cultivation levels of the monarch stars from the foreign realm. With each name they called, a delighted roar would erupt from the cultivators of the foreign realm. Their morale instantly recovered, and it even started to become more fervent and lively. Meanwhile, the cultivators from the celestial realm felt extremely stifled. The foreign realm actually possessed this many monarch stars. In fact, Someone had already reached the 11th secret? This was far too terrifying. This quantity and this quality. It was as if they had suppressed the entire celestial realm. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Let them come over. I'll annihilate whoever comes my way." Even though his voice wasn't loud, its infectious tone lit a flame of hope in everyone's mind, expelling the frosty fear that had gripped their bodies. "Leave!" Gadolin roared. There was a gap of 2 minor levels between them and Ling Han, so even if he teamed up with Yamu, they would still be no match for him. Being stubborn would be akin to seeking death. They had no other option. The people they had mentioned either hadn't come or were currently cultivating in seclusion, aiming to reach a higher cultivation level. Ling Han stood with his hands clasped behind his back, saying in a calm voice, "1 or 2 people will suffice to deliver this message. As for the others, your life ends here." Chapter 2248 Crushing Defeat of the Foreign Realm. Chapter 2248 Crushing Defeat of the Foreign Realm. The cultivators from the celestial realm were filled with spirit and inspiration upon hearing this. How domineering! How inspiring! When Gadolin had attacked just then, hundreds of cultivators from the celestial realm had been killed. Meanwhile, Yamu's vicious violence was no lesser, and she had also swallowed many cultivators from the celestial realm. However, whom could they blame for being too weak? If it weren't for Ling Han's arrival, not only would Alien have not helped them, he might have even been killed by Gadolin and Yamu. Ling Han had suddenly arrived, and he had sent Yamu flying with a single punch. Now he had also uttered such inspiring and morale-boosting words, expressing his desire to obliterate the forces of the foreign realm. They were naturally as enthused as could be. Yamu and Gadolin both wore grave expressions. There was a gap of 2 cultivation levels between them and Ling Han, and their battle prowess was at least 100 times inferior. It would be useless even if they teamed up. They couldn't rival Ling Han at all. No, even if all of the cultivators from the foreign realm teamed up, they still couldn't rival Ling Han. "Leave. We'll hold him back," Gadolin said. As the most powerful member of the foreign realm present, he needed to shoulder this responsibility. Understood. Regardless of how arrogant, violent, and barbaric the cultivators of the foreign realm were, they still had no option but to bow their heads before absolute power. They all started to retreat. "Did I let you leave?" Ling Han asked in a cold voice. His body flashed, and thousands upon thousands of his clones materialized. Pung, pung, pung. His clones all attacked in unison, instantly crushing the heads of thousands of cultivators from the foreign realm. Their divine senses were also obliterated. To say nothing of several thousand people. If he wanted to, he could even kill hundreds of millions or billions of people together. "You've gone too far!" Yamu and Gadolin bellowed in rage. In the past, it had only ever been the foreign realm picking on the celestial realm. Now, however, a cultivator from the celestial realm was actually slaughtering them like chickens. This caused them to burn with unbridled rage. "Is that so?" Ling Han was completely unfazed as he attacked again. Pa, 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 pa. The cultivators from the foreign realm were crushed one after another, with their bodies transforming into clouds of flesh and blood. "Leave! Retreat!" Yamu and Gadolin roared. At the same time, they also started to retreat. If they didn't flee now, all of them would be trapped here. Die! The cultivators from the celestial realm excitedly gave chase. For so long, they had been forced to harbor and suppress their resentment. The celestial realm had always been a target of invasion, generation after generation. How many young prodigies had left their corpses here? In fact, some of them couldn't even leave a corpse. Moreover, during the 2 previous battles among the severing mundane tier cultivators and the dividing soul tier cultivators, the celestial realm had also suffered an overwhelming defeat. They hadn't won a single battle. However, a ferocious person in Ling Han had suddenly appeared, and his formidable might was such that the foreign realm was crushed and forced into a hasty retreat. In fact, Even their monarch star had been sent flying with a single punch. This vented the anger of the celestial realm, and it allowed them to fully unleash the flames of fury that had been suppressed deep in their hearts. Battle. They would battle to their heart's content. Boom! The cultivators from the celestial realm charged over like a tidal wave, and the cultivators from the foreign realm fled in disarray. Friend, you can ignore the small fry, but you definitely have to dispose of those too, Alien said as he pointed at Gadolin and Yamu. These were two monarch stars, and if he allowed them to develop, they would certainly become terrifying ninth heaven celestial kings in the future. It was hard to fathom just what kind of massacre the celestial realm would face at that time. Ling Han nodded in reply. This was war, and there was no such thing as mercy. Moreover, the foreign realm was the invader, so he more so didn't need to show any mercy. Whoosh! With a flash, he had already charged over to block Gadolin and Yamu. The single horn on Gadolin's head glowed as he glared at Ling Han, and he said, Yamu, we're fighting with our backs to the wall. Unleash the ultimate attack. A cruel and eager expression spread across Yamu's face, and she said agreed. Even if we die, we need to take someone down with us. They were both channeling some sort of mystical power. Gadolin's horn glowed with brilliance, and upon reaching a pinnacle state, it directly dissolved, allowing his battle prowess to explosively rise more than tenfold. Meanwhile, limbs fell off Yamu's body one by one, and she was increasing her battle prowess through the means of self-harm. Ling Han didn't interfere, and he simply observed them with his hands clasped behind his back. He was the true ruler of this heaven and earth. Die! Gadolin and Yamu roared as they attacked in unison. Boom! This was the ultimate attack of two powerful monarch stars. Like a tsunami, the roaring wave of energy riled up the entire realm. Pung, pung, pung. Numbering in the trillions, countless surrounding stars were shattered into oblivion. A black dagger was spat out from Gadolin's mouth, streaking toward Ling Han. Meanwhile, countless bony thorns formed from Yamu's abandoned limbs, transforming into a rain of piercing arrows. They were willing to suffer self-harm to raise their battle prowess, and they were more so attacking in unison. Such was the might of their attacks that even ninth secret monarch stars would dare not face them head-on. After unleashing this attack, however, the two of them immediately turned around to flee. They weren't fleeing toward the exit, but rather in opposite directions, one to the left and one to the right. They fled into the depths of this realm. Their speed was incredible, and in the blink of an eye, they had already disappeared from view. Ling Han raised a hand, gently tapping the space before him. The rushing dagger and the pouring arrows were instantly reduced to ashes. However, Alien sighed upon seeing this. The two monarch stars had resolutely decided to suffer self-harm to flee from Ling Han. Even 10th secret elites wouldn't be able to stop them. After all, those at the 10th secret were still immortal palace tier elites. This was unlike 11th secret elites, whose battle prowess had already reached the stage of the ascending origin tier. Against 11th secret elites, even the violent struggle of 10th secret monarch stars would be completely futile. Friend, who in the world are you? Alien asked in extreme curiosity. Since when had the celestial realm produced such a supreme prodigy? Ling Han patted Alien's shoulder with a smile and said, Didn't I already say? I'm called the Chicken Slayer. All right, it's time for me to slay some chicken now. With a flash, he vanished without a trace. Alien didn't believe that Ling Han could catch up to Gadolin and Yamu. The two of them were only 2 minor levels below Ling Han, and they had more so fled earlier and in opposite directions as well. Thus, it would be extremely difficult to pursue even one of them, let alone 2. After pondering for a brief moment, Alien started to pursue the fleeing forces of the foreign realm. Even though he had exhausted a great deal of his power of regulations, 1% of power of an 8th secret monarch star was still incredibly great. Gadolin fled a boundless distance, and he had even relied on the surrounding celestial bodies to hide his tracks. He was confident that he had completely broken free from Ling Han's pursuit. A resentful expression spread across his face as he stroked the snapped horn on his head. In his tribe, the sole horn on their head was the hardest part of their bodies. It could rival pseudo-divine metal of the same level, and it was a place to store their blood essence. In times of danger, they could forcefully combust the blood essence within this horn to gain a huge increase in battle prowess. However, once they started to combust their blood essence, this process could no longer be stopped. This huge loss of blood essence would not only cause their battle prowess to fall dramatically, but it would also cause their cultivation to revert by a certain degree. In fact, it would even affect their future cultivation. However, as long as he survived, there would always be an opportunity to regain all this. He arrived on a star, a newly born star. This was a desolate star with no trace of life. Gadolin panted as he sat on a boulder, and he swallowed some alchemical pills to treat his broken horn. "Oi, don't sit on my body," a voice said from below him. Gadolin was given a fright, and he instantly jumped up in surprise. He stared at the boulder with incredulity. That was nothing but a stone, one which had neither hands nor feet. Impossible. His heart beat like thunder. He had clearly heard Ling Han's voice just then. "Are you looking for me?" Ling Han asked. Gadolin hurriedly spun around, only to see Ling Han standing behind him. "Impossible!" he immediately exclaimed. Even if Ling Han were more powerful than him, it should have still been impossible for Ling Han to approach him so stealthily. Chapter 2249 Erase. Chapter 2249 Erase. Ling Han revealed his true appearance. There were no other people here, so he naturally didn't need to conceal his identity anymore. He smiled and mused. Why is it impossible? Gadolin stared at Ling Han, and he felt that this person was as unfamiliar as could be. Even without a mask, he still couldn't recognize this person. He pointed at Ling Han and said, "You're only 2 minor levels above me, so how are you able to catch up to me so quickly? Moreover, I wasn't able to detect your presence at all." It would have been more understandable if Ling Han had been an ascending origin tier elite. However, ascending origin tiers were unable to enter this realm. In other words, the only explanation was that Ling Han was at the 11th layer of the 8th lotus. Was this possible? Ling Han smiled and replied, "How is this impossible? You're merely a frog at the bottom of a well." Gadolin also chuckled, saying, "Even though you caught up to me, you've already spoken with me for so long. Moreover, I can still hold you back for some time. This will be enough time for Yamu to escape. Don't be so smug. Once Qi Shui arises, killing you will be as easy as slaying a chicken." Ling Han shook his head and replied, "No, I'm the chicken slayer. Stealing my title isn't a good habit." "Ha ha ha. Come battle." Gadolin roared. He abandoned all other thoughts, and the only thing remaining on his mind was battle. After abandoning all other thoughts, his mind surprisingly underwent a transformation. Boom! A terrifying aura exuded from his body, and his strength rose by a significant amount. In the past, he had never entered such a state before. Thus, now that his mind was tempered and tested, he surprisingly transcended his self. A monarch star was a monarch star after all. Even in such a difficult situation, he was still able to transform danger into opportunity. What a shame! If I had been afforded some more time, I could have ascended to the 9th layer of the 8th lotus. At that time, it would have been difficult to determine the victor, Gadolin said with an expression of pity. If he ascended to the 9th layer of the 8th lotus, and if he combusted his blood essence, his strength would then rival the 10th layer of the 8th lotus. He would be no weaker than Ling Han. Ling Han smiled and said, "Fine, I'll grant you a cultivation of the 9th secret." With his tap, a ray of light instantly encircled Gadolin, causing his aura to rise at a rapid rate. It was as if this rise had no limit. 3 times, 5 times, 10 times. Gadolin's cultivation reached the 9th layer of the 8th lotus. His cultivation level had clearly grown by a significant amount, but Gadolin couldn't help but feel cold with fear. Cold sweat drenched his body. With a single tap, his cultivation level had been raised by a minor level? Just what kind of ability was this? Is he a god? He suddenly faltered as this thought flashed through his mind. An expression of shock spread across his face. His finger trembled as he pointed at Ling Han, and he stammered, "Waiwu, you obtained the origin magic cube. If this weren't the case, even a celestial king couldn't elevate his cultivation by minor level with a single tap. After all, heaven and earth also abided by their own regulations. Only by becoming the ruler of this heaven and earth could one do as they pleased. With a single thought, they could become god or devil. Of course, his rise in cultivation level would only be effective in this realm. Once he left, his cultivation would return to normal." Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "You've finally realized." Gadolin's skin had originally been crimson red, yet it was now as white as a sheet. He was dumbfounded as he stared at Ling Han, and fear started to slowly eat away at his mind. His opponent had purposefully disguised himself as a cultivator at the 10th layer of the 8th lotus. He was clearly trying to trick the foreign realm. What level have you reached?" he asked with a sliver of hope. Perhaps this heaven and earth was too weak, in which case Ling Han might only have a cultivation at the 15th lotus or 16th lotus. If that were the case, his strength would naturally be much more limited. Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, "Killing a 9th heaven celestial king or an 18th lotus elite for the foreign realm shouldn't be a big problem." "You sure are scheming enough," Gadolin said, feeling an urge to vomit blood. He could envision how the celestial kings of foreign realm, who made no preparations, would be slaughtered by Ling Han. Ling Han smiled and said, "These are your final words. Don't be so arrogant. Regardless of how powerful you are, you still can't rival heavenly venerates." Gadolin roared, "We have far more heavenly venerates than you, and any one of them will be able to crush you like an ant. Well, this has nothing to do with you. Off you go, and hopefully you reincarnate into a better person in your next life." Ling Han immediately lashed out. "Pum!" With a single punch, Gadolin was instantly erased from existence. "There's still one more," Ling Han murmured, like flowing air. His body became transparent before vanishing without a trace. Yama didn't stop fleeing. She had barely consumed any power of regulations, and after using self-harming means, her battle prowess had increased by tenfold. She was at her peak state right now, and she would dare to battle against even 9th secret monarch stars. She traveled in a huge arc, and her goal was simply to escape from this realm. Whoosh! She was extremely skilled in the regulations of space, and her speed was astonishingly quick as a result. A strange feeling suddenly gripped her mind. This was because the surrounding stars seemed slightly familiar to her. For a monarch star, such feelings naturally wouldn't arise for no reason. Since they seemed familiar, she had definitely seen them before. She took note of this. Whoosh! She rapidly flew past, yet after a moment, she suddenly ground to a halt. Cold sweat dripped down her insect face. That star! She had passed it before. She wasn't traveling in circles, so how could this be the case? However, she was a monarch star after all, so her willpower was naturally impressive. She immediately composed herself before setting off again. This time, she remained laser-focused and explicitly observed her surroundings. It appeared again. Astonishment spread across her insect face again. This was the 3rd time she had seen this star. What's going on? Just what in the world is going on? Was this eerie occurrence due to the fact that this heaven and earth had only just been born? Why was she unlucky enough to encounter it? Moreover, at such a sensitive moment. Is it fun? A voice suddenly asked next to her ear. Who is it? Yamu exclaimed. She hurriedly looked left and right. yet she couldn't see anyone at all. She became even more frightened. With her power, someone was still able to conceal themselves before her? This was simply unfathomable. Are you that forgetful? Ling Han said with a chuckle. It's you. Yama stammered, instantly recalling who it was. Her body involuntarily trembled. This person had actually caught up to her so quickly, a cold chill ran down her spine. What frightened her more was the continually reappearing planets. Was that also related to Ling Han? If it were, that would be far too terrifying. Ling Han materialized before her, and it was as if he had stepped out from the empty space. Haha. Yamu immediately composed herself. She was a monarch star, after all, so her mental fortitude was naturally superior to that of ordinary people. Since you've chosen to pursue me, Gadolin can definitely escape. After some years, when Gadolin becomes an 18th Lotus Elite, he'll definitely slaughter the ants of the Celestial Realm and exact revenge for me. Ling Han chuckled and said, Gadolin said the exact same thing to me. Bullsh *T. Yamu shouted in a trembling voice. Huh, you didn't find the phenomenon just then strange? Ling Han asked with a smile. It was your doing? Yamu asked. She couldn't help but shiver. That's right, Ling Han said with a nod. Yamu finally came to her senses at this moment, exclaiming, You obtained the Origin Magic Cube! You can control this heaven and earth. Correct again. However, it's a pity that there's no prize, Ling Han said with a grin. Yamu's face was ashen. The Origin Magic Cube had actually fallen into Ling Han's hands. That being the case, Ling Han could naturally manipulate the realm as he pleased. Just like Gadolin, she thought of many things at this moment. Ling Han was clearly far more powerful than he let on, yet he was concealing his power on purpose. For what reason did he do this? He wanted to screw them over big time. Chapter 2250 Return. Chapter 2250 Return. Your guess is correct. I indeed want to screw you guys over. In fact, it would be best if I could kill all of you, from top to bottom, Ling Han said with a smile. However, there's no need for you to worry, because you won't live to see that day. He casually snapped his fingers. Pa! The gigantic insect body of Yamu instantly erupted, signifying her death. A small harvest. With a single thought from him, numerous spatial god tools instantly materialized before him. They had all been left behind by the foreign realm cultivators who had been killed. Initially, they had been scattered around the realm. However, this realm was like an extension of Ling Han's body, so it was naturally an easy task for him to collect these spatial god tools. If I want to trick and kill the elites of the foreign realm, the first thing I need to do is to get them to enter this realm. Ling Han continued to murmur to himself, saying, As such, I need to elevate the upper limit of the regulations of this heaven and earth. That way, Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings will also be able to enter. At that time, I can kill to my heart's content. He immediately acted on his plan, elevating the regulations of this heaven and earth. He was the ruler of this heaven and earth now, so he was naturally transcendent above its regulations. In other words, he could implement any regulation that he wanted. However, he quickly realized that while it was a simple task to elevate the regulations to the ascending origin tier, trying to elevate them to the celestial king tier was far more difficult. This heaven and earth was indeed on the level of pseudo-heavenly venerates. However, its regulations were far inferior to this level. He unleashed his full power, yet he could only raise the regulations to the fifth heaven celestial king tier. However, if he personally sustained the realm, anyone would be able to ignore the suppression of the regulations and enter. Even heavenly venerates could enter without triggering a backlash. No wonder the heavenly venerates from the foreign realm hadn't directly destroyed this realm. As it turned out, they wanted someone from their side to obtain control over it. Otherwise, if they destroyed it, it would destabilize the connection point between the two realms. In turn, This would delay the moment of their full-scale invasion. In this case, I can only trap and kill 14th Lotus elites at a maximum. Ling Han was slightly unhappy about this. However, he immediately chuckled at his own ambition. Just what cultivation level am I at? Is killing 14th Lotus elites not enough? This is still an unfathomable achievement. Celestial kings above the 5th heaven wouldn't be able to enter at all. If they forced their way in, they would be making enemies of the pseudo-heavenly venerate level heaven and earth. In other words, they would be trying to strike a rock with an egg. They would be seeking death. Even though I have no intentions of refining the origin magic cube, controlling the workings of this heaven and earth is a rare opportunity and experience. It can help me comprehend the essence of heaven and earth, thereby allowing me to surpass the limitations of the regulations, Ling Han thought to himself. With a single thought, he appeared on the outskirts of this heaven and earth. If he took another step forward, he would arrive in the territory of the celestial realm. Once I return to the celestial realm, I will have lost all respect and fear toward the regulations and heaven and earth. After all, I've also experienced the sensation of being a ruler over heaven and earth, even though this realm is far inferior to the celestial realm. However, on a fundamental level, it's still the same thing. I'm not resigned to being suppressed by heaven and earth. There was an unstoppable urge in Ling Han's mind. Not only did he want to become a heavenly venerate, but becoming the heavenly venerate still wasn't his final goal. He wanted to become the ruler of heaven and earth, not just someone who was transcendent above the regulations. The sealed emotion, heavenly venerable, and the others are definitely involved in the death of the karmic life, heavenly venerable. If I want them to pay a price, simply becoming a heavenly venerate isn't enough. He continued forward, and he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. After leaving the neutral zone, his strength returned to normal, and he had to travel using his own powers. This was unlike the neutral zone, where he could teleport anywhere he wanted with a single thought. He arrived beneath the clear heaven pass. Here, there was a transfer formation that could teleport him into the clear heaven pass. Whoa! Light undulated, and his body vanished. He had already entered the clear heaven pass. He then arrived at the 17th camp of Unit D, where he first reported his return to Nyahashan. He had vanished for over 1,000 years, so he naturally needed to report in to his superior. In fact, he might even receive punishment from the military. "Where did you go all these years?" Nyahashan asked with a displeased expression. Because of Ling Han, he had even been scolded by the Eternity Celestial King. However, whom could he explain this to? Ling Han had his own feet, and he naturally couldn't chain him down either. Ling Han had naturally prepared an excuse beforehand, and he said, "I came across a rare opportunity, so I've been cultivating in seclusion this entire time." Nyahashan frowned and said, "Do you know just how incorrect your decision was? Do you think your cultivation speed is quick? Let me tell you, Ji Wuming, Hong Huang, and the others have already reached the 5th secret." "Phut, already?" However, after pondering over it for a brief moment, it indeed made sense. It had already been an entire 1,400 years, and with the acceleration of time, Ji Wuming and the others had actually experienced an astonishingly long time in cultivation. Moreover, they had received an exorbitant amount of cultivation resources, and they even had the guidance of a celestial king. As such, it was only natural that their cultivation advanced at an astounding pace. One had to realize that they were all monarch stars. For example, Ji Wuming was the reincarnation of a 9th heaven celestial king. So to say nothing of the 1st secret, Ling Han could have accepted it even if he had reached the 11th secret. Ling Han simply nodded in reply. In any case, he couldn't tell the truth, so he could only obediently accept the scolding. The Eternity Celestial King had wanted to guide you, allowing you to walk a different path. It was because of this intention that he sent you over here to undergo some comprehensions first. After staying here for 200 years, the Eternity Celestial King planned to take you away to cultivate. Unexpectedly, however, you hid somewhere to cultivate in seclusion. Nahashan shook his head, continuing, You're far too foolish. Aren't you abandoning something important to take something unimportant? Ling Han simply smiled in reply. He naturally couldn't say that he had obtained the core of a realm. If he refined it, he could more so become a ninth heaven celestial king without any effort. At that time, he could enjoy the same standing as the eternity celestial king. What important thing? What unimportant thing? He was extremely clear about his own decisions. Your friends and wives have already been picked up by the eternity celestial king as well. They have their own fates and opportunities, so you need not worry about them. Nahashan quickly changed the topic, and he started to console Ling Han instead. After saying a few more sentences, he realized that this was pointless, so he dismissed Ling Han. News about the events inside the neutral zone quickly spread out. Along with it, the name of the mysterious chicken slayer elite also spread throughout the Clear Heaven Pass. This person was far too powerful. They had sent an 8th secret monarch star flying with a single punch, and they were even more powerful than alien. Could the Clear Heaven Pass find a second person like this? Perhaps only Xing Qinyue could rival this person's power. At the same time, the huge transformation of the neutral zone was also discovered by everyone. Not only could Immortal Palace tier elites enter, but even ascending origin tier elites and celestial kings could enter now. This transformation left them feeling extremely uneasy. Perhaps a full-scale battle was going to erupt at any moment. The foreign realm also responded quickly, sending another request for the Immortal Palace tier elites of both realms to spar. This also came with a condition whereby every victory for the celestial realm would delay the invasion from the foreign realm by 10,000 years. Many people were enticed by this offer. Winning a single battle could win 10,000 years of peace. This signified that the celestial realm would have more time to cultivate and recover. At the same time, they would also have more time to nurture the next generation of prodigies, such that they could better defend against the next invasion from the foreign realm. This was especially the case since the celestial realm had many Immortal Palace tier monarch stars who had the right to participate in this battle. These monarch stars had a chance at victory. However, this naturally wasn't a decision for ordinary people. Instead, it was a decision for the celestial kings. In fact, only ninth heaven celestial kings could participate in the discussion about whether they accepted this offer or not. 7 days passed, and a decision was passed down battle. There was only a single word, yet this roused the fighting spirit of everyone in the Clear Heaven Pass. Chapter 2251, Second Secret. Chapter 2251, Second Secret. In order to boost the morale of the army, the celestial kings also divulged some other news. For example, Ji Wuming and the other monarch stars had all received extremely good nurturing. Several celestial kings who were skilled in the regulations of time had provided help, even sacrificing some of their essence to accelerate the flow of time for them. They had artificially created more time for these prodigies to cultivate. In addition to the endless flow of cultivation resources from the entire celestial realm, the cultivation of these monarch stars had progressed at an astonishing rate. All of them had already surpassed the 5th secret. However, the celestial kings didn't reveal the exact cultivation level that they had reached. One had to realize that there were potentially spies of the foreign realm in the Clear Heaven Pass. This was extremely normal. After all, the celestial realm was the weaker of the two, and they were in a position of absolute disadvantage. Thus, it was only natural that some people would change their allegiance and betray the celestial realm. In fact, there might even be powerful and influential beings among the traitors. As such, they naturally couldn't reveal too much important information. The two sides agreed to hold the 3rd sparring session in the neutral zone in 1 month's time. It was referred to as sparring, yet in reality, these were incredibly bloody and vicious battles. Which sparring session hadn't resulted in death? which sparring session hadn't resulted in prodigies becoming cripples, completely severing their cultivation journey. It was just that these sacrifices had all been suffered by the celestial realm. Now, however, the celestial realm was brimming with confidence. This was because they could finally unleash their own monarch stars this time. In the past, they had achieved a draw in the battle between Alien and Gadolin. Recently, the Chicken Slayer had defeated Yamu with a single punch. Now they were going to send Ji Wuming and the others. The morale of the celestial realm rose by a noticeable amount. Taking advantage of this 1 month, Ling Han exchanged all of his bountiful harvest for starstones. He then wantonly purchased godly metal. At the same time, he also returned to the neutral zone, where he extracted all of the godly metal from the realm. He used all that to elevate the level of his divine demon sword. However, he immediately sighed after doing this. This was because this heaven and earth was truly far too small. It had simply been created by the collision and fusion between the two realms. Thus, there wasn't too much godly metal in this realm. Of course, this was only comparatively speaking. The divine demon sword hadn't ascended to become a celestial tool, yet it still soared from the level of 4-star pseudo-celestial tool to 8-star pseudo-celestial tool. 8 stars. What kind of concept was this? Right now, the divine demon sword could even breach the defenses of ascending origin tier elites and threaten their lives. It's drawing closer and closer to 10 stars, Ling Han said with a beaming smile. After reaching 10 stars, the divine demon sword could undergo a final ascension and become a celestial tool. If it were any other celestial tool, he wouldn't be able to wield it even if it were gifted to him. However, something that he had personally refined was completely different. He could unleash its full might. Of course, with his current strength, he couldn't engrave a celestial king tier martial intent on the divine demon sword. He could only use it as a physical weapon. Even so, just a wisp of murderous aura from such a celestial tool could easily shred apart the body of an ascending origin tier elite. Its might was simply astonishing. This was similar to how Ji Wuming had forced him to flee and hide when wielding a divine sword in the past. After enhancing the divine demon sword, Ling Han entered the Black Tower and started to cultivate toward the second secret. Even though he had continued to obtain knowledge from the Origin Magic Cube all these years, this was a treasure at the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Just a small amount of benefits would help him immensely. Thus, his cultivation had unknowingly reached the peak stage of the first secret. He could now attempt to break through to the second secret. Second brother, Hunyo Luanxing, and the others were most likely able to reach the second secret or even third secret long ago. Fortunately, I refined many thousand-year dream pills and already gave them to them. Otherwise, I would have hindered their progress. Ling Han murmured to himself as he retrieved a 1,000-year dream pill and popped it in his mouth. Boom! His body shuddered, and his divine sense was forcefully dragged out from his body, entering the river of time. The memories that he had severed instantly returned, and he recalled that he had once been hunted by the Juwu heavenly venerate here. Just what in the world are these heavenly venerates playing at? He murmured. He mulled over this as he advanced. If the celestial realm is destroyed, how does this benefit them? Why are they so passive in defending against this invasion? Alternatively, if they wish for the celestial realm to be destroyed, why don't they actively attack and help the foreign realm? If the 3 heavenly venerates teamed up, they could easily massacre the entire world. At that time, there would naturally be no one to stop the invasion from the foreign realm. As a result, they could engulf this heaven and earth countless times quicker. Also, the ancient realm being cut into 2 was also the doing of the heavenly venerates. Only they have such immense abilities. However, this has essentially prohibited Genesis tier cultivators from ascending into the celestial realm. Moreover, there are also strict rules that prohibit people from the celestial realm bringing cultivators back from the ancient realm. At the end of the day, they don't want people to enter the celestial realm. What's the reason behind this? As smart as Ling Han was, he still couldn't fathom the reason behind any of this. He couldn't help but find these decisions conflicting or illogical. Forget about it. With my current cultivation level, I don't have the right to make any sense of this. It's more important to raise my cultivation level first. His ascension was extremely smooth this time. No heavenly venerate entered the time stream to attack him, so he was able to reach the second secret with ease. This time, he chose his liver as the secret realm. With 2 secret realms cultivated, he instantly felt his power rising by a significant amount. The cultivation level of second secret monarch stars is equivalent to the third secret. Meanwhile, their battle prowess can rival those at the peak stage of the sixth secret. Comparatively speaking, monarch stars possessed a cultivation that was 1 secret superior to monarch tiers. The gulf between them was like the gulf between monarch tiers and emperor tiers. It was extremely evident. In any case, my progress is indeed very slow. Ji Wuming and the others have already surpassed the 5th secret, and perhaps they've already reached the 6th, 7th, or even 8th secret, Ling Han murmured to himself. However, he didn't pay much heed to this. He had witnessed the secret of the birth of heaven and earth, so the level of his knowledge was transcendent above the regulations. As a result, his way of considering problems and viewing things had also changed. This would most definitely be reflected in his future cultivation. To him, the 9 heavens of the celestial king tier would truly be a walk in the park. Even if he weren't a monarch star, advancing through these cultivation levels would still be a breeze. Monarch stars could definitely become 9th heaven celestial kings. However, 9th heaven celestial kings weren't necessarily all monarch stars. Thus, there was still a huge gulf between the different 9th heaven celestial kings. Second secret, This is most likely at the bottom of the pile among the monarch stars. However, if we do battle in the neutral zone... Ling Han stroked his chin and thought. If 9th heaven celestial kings could enter the neutral zone, he could hunt them down with an intention to kill. He didn't exit the Black Tower, and he instead started to investigate the regulations contained within the Origin Magic Cube. This was something born from the fusion between the 2 realms, so it contained the regulations of not only the celestial realm, but also the foreign realm. Right now, he was investigating the regulations of this foreign realm. This was because he harbored a daring plan. He wanted to enter the foreign realm to have a look around. However, if he didn't practice the cultivation method of the foreign realm, entering recklessly would be no different from seeking death. With the Origin Magic Cube, however, he now had a chance to investigate the regulations of the foreign realm. Several days passed in the outside world, and this was equivalent to several thousand years in the Black Tower. Ling Han attained a certain level of enlightenment. Gadolin and the others are all extremely arrogant. They view the celestial realm with disdain, and they refer to us as a super lowly dimension. I don't understand what dimension means, but their power and arrogance aren't without reason. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh. The regulations of the foreign realm also possessed flames, time, and all other things. Comparing them against the regulations of the celestial realm, Ling Han discovered that they were all more powerful. The regulations being more powerful also signified that their heaven and earth was more powerful. The neutral zone was a tangible proof of this. Its heaven and earth was weaker, so the upper limit of its regulations was also lower. Thus, a higher level dimension could affect the overall level of cultivation. Chapter 2252, Consecutive Falls. Chapter 2252, Consecutive Falls. Why was it the foreign realm invading the celestial realm, and not the other way around? This was because their heaven and earth was superior, and they also had a larger number of elites who possessed a more powerful battle prowess. Thus, they were the invaders. However, the essence of the different heaven and earth are the same, Ling Han remarked after carefully mulling over it. Compared to the celestial realm, the foreign realm had one more regulation darkness. When the regulation of darkness was unleashed, it would cause one to enter a state of wild frenzy. At the same time, it would also strip one's vision and divine sense. It was an extremely powerful regulation. The celestial realm didn't possess this regulation. During this 1 month, Ling Han didn't do much. He simply spent tens of thousands of years in the Black Tower to extract a sliver of regulation of darkness. With a thought, his body instantly transformed, with a sole horn growing from his head and a tail growing from his lower back. Pah! His shoes exploded apart as his feet turned into bull-like hooves. At the same time, his skin also became crimson like flames. He was disguising himself as a member of the foreign realm in terms of physical appearance. Anyone could do this. However, this was only a physical disguise and not a disguise of one's aura, so any random celestial could easily see through it with a single glance. Ling Han then channeled the regulation of darkness, and his aura instantly underwent a fundamental change. He was now no different from the members of the foreign realm. So weak. I'm only as powerful as the weakest severing mundane tier cultivator, Ling Han murmured. If he entered the foreign realm at this moment, his immortal palace tier power would be quickly exhausted since he couldn't replenish it with the regulations of the celestial realm. Even with the help of the Black Tower, there would still come a moment where he would exhaust all of his power. At that time, he would only be able to channel the regulations of the foreign realm. In that case, he would only be as powerful as an ordinary severing mundane tier cultivator. However, the regulations of heaven and earth are much the same. If I cultivate in earnest, I can most likely advance at a rapid speed. He calculated in his mind. Because he possessed the origin magic cube, he was confident that he could quickly become a 9th heaven celestial kinger and 18th lotus elite regardless of which set of regulations he cultivated. Moreover, the regulations of the foreign realm are actually slightly superior. Cultivating these regulations is ultimately beneficial for me. It can allow me to become more powerful. Ling Han was fervent in his pursuit for cultivation, and he was hell-bent on achieving perfection. In the celestial realm, he had reached a state of perfection in each major tier. However, he could only shake his head now. There were still many places where he wasn't powerful enough. This wasn't because of him, but because of the limitations imposed by this heaven and earth. In the celestial realm, he could be regarded as perfect. In the foreign realm, however, he still had room for improvement. With this in mind, he couldn't help but feel slightly astonished. If the foreign realm deployed a genuinely powerful prodigy, would even Ji Wuming be able to rival them? It wasn't that Ji Wuming wasn't freakish enough. Rather, this was because of the level of this heaven and earth. Thankfully, I'm in possession of the origin magic cube, which allows me to blatantly cheat. Who cares what they throw at me? I'll suppress them all. Ling Han exited the Black Tower. If he were afforded more time, he would still want to investigate the other regulations of the foreign realm, thereby tempering his cultivation to an increasingly perfect state. The 17th camp of Unit D departed for the neutral zone. Even though this was only a sparring match between the two realms, its implication was significant. Although most of the people here couldn't participate in the battles, they could still at least cheer the celestial realm on. Because the upper limit of the regulations of the neutral zone had risen, Nyeheshan could also enter this time. He didn't need to stand guard outside. In reality, many ascending origin tier elites and even celestial kings had entered the neutral zone during this past month. Their aim was to hunt the beings of this realm. They could obtain celestial medicines, and they could also obtain meat to replenish the expenditure of their power of regulations. Ling Han had initially wanted to absorb all of these living beings into the Black Tower. However, upon further thought, wouldn't doing so raise everyone's suspicion? Thus, he could only endure this pain. In order to lure larger fish onto his hook, he had no option but to make some small sacrifices. After all, one had to lose some to gain some. Humph! Shin Chao immediately sneered upon seeing Ling Han. There was a cold smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He had advanced to the ascending origin tier. Initially, he had only been at the peak stage of the fifth secret, after 1,400 years, and with heaven knew how many years, thanks to the acceleration of time, he successfully underwent a huge transformation and advanced to the ascending origin tier. One had to realize that those at the immortal palace tier still channeled origin power. However, those at the ascending origin tier could transform all of their origin power into source power. It was because of this that they had the title of ascending origin. Their might was inconceivable, and they were beings the immortal palace tier cultivators couldn't dream to rival. Xin Chao naturally viewed Ling Han with disdain. What did it matter that he was a monarch star? He was merely at the second secret, so the former could easily suppress him with a single finger. However, this was not the right place for him to cause trouble, so he could only shoot a menacing glare at Ling Han. In the future, he would definitely wipe the floor with Ling Han's face. Meanwhile, he also felt a sense of regret in his mind. He hadn't realized that Ling Han had already returned a month ago. Otherwise, he would have definitely charged over to exact revenge. Why had he stayed in the army after advancing to the ascending origin tier? Was it not to exact revenge? Ling Han saw Xin Chao's expression, and he couldn't help but chuckle. This person dared to provoke him in the neutral zone. He was asking for a beating. Pah! Under the gaze of everyone, Xin Chao surprisingly face-planted into the ground. Ha 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 ha. Many people couldn't help but laugh. This was far too hilarious. An ascending origin tier elite had actually tripped for no reason? Moreover, it was such a comprehensive faceplant. Was this not comical? Meanwhile, Xin Chao wore a dazed expression. He didn't know what had happened either. Before he knew it, he had suddenly fallen and face-planted. It was as if heaven and earth were forcing him to kneel. There was nothing he could have done to prevent it. He picked himself up. However, before he could even stabilize himself, he suddenly lurched forward and fell again. This time his fall was even harder, and even some of his teeth were sent flying. Blood poured from his face. Pah! He picked himself up again, yet his knees suddenly buckled, and he fell for the third time. This time, no one could laugh anymore. They couldn't help but find this extremely uncanny. Did Xin Chao offend some celestial king? Someone asked in speculation. Otherwise, how could an ascending origin tier elite become so disheveled? But the Shun clan also possesses a celestial king. From what I've heard, this is a seventh heaven celestial king, no less. Which celestial king isn't giving him face? Someone asked in confusion. The most powerful people who could enter this place were fifth heaven celestial kings. So how did the celestial king dare to pick on the weak? Was he not afraid of the wrath from the celestial king of the Shun clan? This is a matter for those mighty figures, so it's best that we don't comment too much. Regardless of whether it was Xin Chao or that secretly fiddling celestial king, they had both far surpassed the level of these people. Xin Chao was still falling again and again. He fell 18 times in a row, and only then did he finally stop falling. He also became afraid at this moment. Without caring about his face, he sat on the ground and glared at the sky. There was deep hatred and resentment in his eyes. A mighty celestial king was actually attacking a measly ascending origin tier elite from the shadows? Did he still care about his face or not? However, why didn't he consider the fact that he was still targeting Ling Han, a second secret elite, even after becoming an ascending origin tier elite? Oh, so he cared about his face. Ling Han smiled faintly. This feeling of toying with others from the shadows was extremely satisfying. No wonder the large black dog was so debauched. Sigh, he had truly been led astray. If the large black dog knew of this, he would definitely bark in protest. Brett, your personality was already like this, okay? After this small aside, the 17th camp traversed mountains and crossed rivers before finally arriving at the designated spot for the sparring match with the foreign realm. This was a sprawling plain, and there was surprisingly a small elevation in its center. It was like a naturally formed platform, and one couldn't help but sigh and marvel at the wonders of heaven and earth. In reality, this was Ling Han's doing. Many people from the celestial realm had already arrived, and there were cultivators with all kinds of cultivation levels. Moreover, there was no age limit to enter, so some of them were adolescents, while others were renowned seniors. The result of this sparring match was far too important. Chapter 2253, Tuta. Chapter 2253, Tuta. Ling Han saw many familiar faces here. There was the alliance of Yi Yen Shenlu, Fuzhou, Hixinju, and so on. However, he didn't see the Empress, Hunyo, and the others, nor did he see the Rain Emperor, Ji Wuming, and the other monarch stars. There were also many people from the foreign realm, yet they kept their distance from those from the celestial realm. The two sides stood 50 kilometers from each other. Ling Han didn't plan on making a scene at this moment, so he simply fused with heaven and earth to observe the situation. Everything was within his grasp. This was truly a peculiar feeling. Many people enjoyed possessing influence and a lofty status, while others enjoyed absolute power. Both could manipulate people's fate, yet this was still nothing compared to becoming the ruler of heaven and earth. Every minuscule matter that occurred here was under his control. With a single thought, he could bring change to heaven and earth. Everyone was under his grasp, could kill whom he wanted, and he could bully whom he wanted. Ling Han could see that more people were making their way over. After a long time, his spirit was finally lifted. This was because he saw the Empress, Hunyo, Bewitching Maiden Ro, and the Rain Emperor. The Empress, Hunyo, and Bewitching Maiden Ro had already reached the 5th secret, a reflection of their quick cultivation speed. The Empress suddenly stopped in her tracks. She had a strange feeling, and it was as if she were being observed by someone. Hunyo clapped her hands and exclaimed, "It's Nyo's Ling Han!" There was joy and delight on her face. "Fourth brother." The Rain Emperor's senses weren't as keen as the two women's, so he was slightly astonished. "It's me," Ling Han's voice said in their minds. "Ling Han, where are you?" Hunyo asked. "I'm waiting for you guys at the destination," Ling Han said with a smile. The Rain Emperor was astounded. They were still incredibly far away from their destination, and he couldn't sense Ling Han's presence at all. Yet Ling Han had been able to locate them with such precision. Not only that, but he had even used his divine sense to speak in their minds. Just what kind of power was this? "Ling Han, Nyo misses you," Hunyo said in a coquettish voice. She didn't care about where Ling Han had been all these years, nor did she care about what he had been doing. She would be happy as long as she could see him again. Ling Han nodded, smiling, and said, "I've also missed my Nyo." Ling Han briefly told them about the origin magic cube. In reality, there wasn't too much to say. Most of the time, he had been in a confused and fuzzy state. The Empress and the others couldn't help but sigh with emotion. They hadn't imagined that such a treasure existed in the neutral zone. Meanwhile, their experiences these past years had also been extremely simple. They knew that Ling Han had definitely disappeared because of some rare opportunity, so they weren't worried at all. They simply cultivated as normal. 1,000 years ago, the Rain Emperor had been taken away by the Eternity Celestial King to undergo focused cultivation. The Rain Emperor had taken the Empress, Hunyo, and Bewitching Maiden Ro with him, and he had clearly expressed that they either all received nurturing, or he wouldn't go at all. Thus, the Empress and the others were also taken along with him. However, the Empress and Hunyo were indeed worthy of nurturing, and it was only in the dividing soul tier that they hadn't reached a state of perfection. Even so, they could still reach the 11th secret of the Immortal Palace tier, and they could still climb to the lofty height of 9th Heaven Celestial King. The Rain Emperor's freakish talent was also displayed, and he had already advanced to the 6th secret. All 4 of them had cultivated the greatest eternity immortal physique. while the Rain Emperor was more so advancing toward the greatest eternity, everlasting physique. He could transform into the flow of time itself, and this was an incredibly mysterious power. Ling Han naturally wouldn't feel jealous, as he could also cultivate the greatest eternity immortal physique when he reached the fifth secret. With the possession of the Origin Magic Cube, he could more so transcend the regulations, something which was far more powerful than any physique. However, it was a shame that the Origin Magic Cube had already fused together with him. As such, he couldn't let the Empress and the others comprehend it. As they conversed, the Rain Emperor and the others finally arrived at the destination. They met up with Ling Han, and the five of them didn't attract much attention as they sat together. After all, the Rain Emperor wasn't as renowned as Ji Wuming and the others. People slowly trickled in, and almost everyone had arrived now. Ling Han also saw Ji Wuming, Hong Huang, and the others, but these people naturally couldn't see him. 9 celestial kings have come. The number of celestial kings from the foreign realm is also 9. Ling Han's eyes were shut, yet he could see everything extremely clearly. Is this something they agreed on earlier? Otherwise, how can there be such a coincidence? If there are only 9 celestial kings, that's a bit too few, he thought to himself. He wanted to do something significant and kill enough celestial kings from the foreign realm, because such a trap could only be used once. Whoosh! A celestial king from the foreign realm appeared, and there was a black lotus with 12 petals between his brows. This signified that he was equivalent to a third heaven celestial king. He stood in the air, and the regulations locked within his body were naturally astonishing in amount. In fact, the invaders from the foreign realm relied on such regulations locked within their bodies to do battle. To them, this was no big deal. "Begin," he said in an apathetic voice. "We'll fight an open tournament where the winner can stay on and continue to battle. What do you say?" An elite from the celestial realm stepped forward and replied, "Accepted." To the celestial realm, such a format was even more beneficial. This was because a single victory could win them 10,000 years of preparation and rest time. "Tuta, you go first," the 12th Lotus elite said. A cultivator from the foreign realm immediately flew forward, landing on the elevated platform in the center of the plain. He had the body of an insect, a praying mantis. His blade-like arms were astonishing in length, and his 6 legs were also riddled with razor-sharp, gleaming spikes. "Tuta, here to battle!" he roared as he waved his blade-like arms, emitting a sharp, clanging sound. "Who wants to come up and accept death?" "Arrogant insect!" a cultivator from the celestial realm spat as he leaped forward. He was a tall and elegant youth. Moreover, he was a 5th secret monarch tier. In such tournaments, only monarch tiers could participate. Moreover, they needed to be at least at the 5th secret. Otherwise, wouldn't the celestial realm have agreed to such a competition long ago? By delaying it, they were simply buying more time to raise the next generation of young prodigies. Tuta lightly rubbed his 2 blade-like arms together and said disdainfully, "No need to tell me your name, because I'll never be able to remember trash like you." "Such arrogance!" the youth roared as he charged at Tuta. The human and insect battled, and the cultivators from the celestial realm quickly developed a frown. Tuta was clearly enjoying the upper hand. After 200 exchanges, the gulf between them became extremely evident, and even fools could tell who was at an advantage. Seeing that the youth was in danger of death at any moment, a powerful figure from the celestial realm said, "Enough, we admit defeat in this battle." The youth wanted to retreat, yet Tuta wasn't willing to comply. He swung his arms, unleashing a surging, killing intent. The powerful figure from the celestial realm humphed coldly, and he immediately reached over, saying, "I said stop!" Pum! However, before he could press down, an elite from the foreign realm also reached over, grabbing his arm. "This is a battle between youths, so why are you trying to interfere?" The elite from the foreign realm said coldly. "Ah." There was a scream of wretched agony as the youth was cut in two at the waist by Tu Ta's blade-like arms. However, when Tu Ta wanted to deal the killing blow, it was as if the youth had received the help of a god as he pushed up from the ground and miraculously shot away, landing in the crowd of cultivators from the celestial realm. As if by a stroke of fortune, he escaped from the clutches of death. In reality, however, this was Ling Han's doing in the shadows. As the ruler of this heaven and earth, he could naturally do this without alerting any of the celestial kings. It was simply as if the youth had suddenly unleashed the potential of his life. Tu Ta abandoned his pursuit, and he simply wore a twisted expression as he stuck his tongue out to lick the blood on his blade-like arms. Next, he said in a baleful voice. He was radiating with burning, killing intent. Chapter 2254. Nyo will battle. Chapter 2254. Nyo will battle. Tu Ta was far too arrogant, and this enraged all of the cultivators from the celestial realm. However, he was indeed powerful, so most people could only stare daggers at him in futility. This was because accepting his challenge would be akin to seeking death. "I'll go." Another person from the celestial realm stepped forward. She was as beautiful as peach blossoms, yet as aloof as frosty ice. It was surprisingly Ran. She was a supreme monarch tier, and she was also the disciple of Shang Jue. As such, she naturally had the right to enter the Saintly Origin Academy, so appearing in this place was also understandable. However, what made Ling Han gloomy was the fact that she had also advanced to the fifth secret. The past 1,000 years were a time when monarch tiers soared. This was because the ninth heaven's celestial kings had ignored all expenses as they provided an endless stream of cultivation resources, giving these prodigies the best possible cultivation environment. As such, the monarch tiers naturally ascended in leaps and bounds, further widening the gap between them and the emperor tiers and king tiers. Nie Heshan's assertion that Ling Han had abandoned something important to take something unimportant had indeed been a fair observation. It was just that no one knew that he had obtained the origin magic cube. This was something far more important than a measly few minor levels. Die. Tu Ta showed no mercy as he attacked, and Ran humphed coldly, and she channeled numerous celestial techniques as her hands danced in the air. Her battle prowess was astonishing. She was a supreme monarch tier, someone who stood in the upper echelon of all monarch tiers. She was far more powerful than the youth who had preceded her. However, Tu Ta was truly powerful, and he was clearly no weaker than Ran. He didn't dodge or evade her strikes, and he instead chose to clash with her head-on. Everyone was engrossed in watching the battle. To the celestial realm, each battle was of utmost importance, as winning once could bring 10,000 years of peace. Moreover, it could also raise their morale. After all, they had lost far too many times before. And Ran was indeed powerful, and she was no weaker than Tu Ta. However, the cultivators from the celestial realm all had an Achilles heel. They could only lock a limited amount of regulations in their bodies, an amount that was far smaller than cultivators from the foreign realm. Because the foreign realm was the invading party, they would start learning how to lock more regulations in their body from a very young age. Otherwise, what right would they have to invade the celestial realm? How could they hope to achieve victory? And Ran was no weaker than Tu Ta, yet she had never specifically trained to increase her capacity to hold regulations before. In the celestial realm, such training would be a complete waste of time and effort. However, the birth of the neutral zone finally allowed the cultivators from the celestial realm to truly recognize the power of the foreign realm. 8 hours into the battle, and Ran finally showed signs of struggling. Solemn expressions spread across the faces of the cultivators from the celestial realm. One had to realize that Tu Ta had already fought a battle before this, yet he was still brimming with the power of regulations. This was truly terrifying. By doing battle in this neutral zone, it was as if they had gifted an advantage to the foreign realm instead. Another 30 minutes passed, and Ran had already lost all ability to attack. She had no option but to admit defeat and retreat. Fortunately, her battle prowess was no weaker than Tu Ta's, so Tu Ta had no opportunity to threaten her life. They had lost another battle. "I'll go." The third challenger from the celestial realm stepped forward. It was none other than Yi. He didn't say any more, and he immediately unleashed a flurry of attacks after charging onto the platform. This was a sparring match, so the use of treasures, decrees, and so on was all banned. Otherwise, it would be a battle of resources instead of a battle of personal strength. "Give me your head." Tu Ta roared with a loud laugh. He swung his blade-like arms, and numerous symbols pulsated with raging, killing intent. Another intense battle ensued. He had started from a lower cultivation level than Ling Han, but he had also advanced to the fifth secret now. This caused Ling Han to involuntarily feel gloomy. Presumably, everyone from the Alliance had already reached the fifth secret. Only he remained at the second secret, even though he was unfathomably powerful as a second secret elite. He was even more powerful than Yan Xianlu, and his freakish talent was no less than that of Enran. In turn, he was no weaker than Tu Ta. The battle between them was intense and furious. After battling for 6 hours, both the human and the insect displayed signs of fatigue, with their battle prowess starting to gradually decrease. Even though Tu Ta had locked more power of regulations in his body, he was finally reaching his limit after battling against 3 monarch tiers in a row. However, the cultivators from the foreign realm were far too familiar with doing battle in such a state. So under the same condition of exhausted power of regulations, Tu Ta had special methods to slow down the consumption of his power of regulations. He was forced to admit defeat. 3 defeats in a row. After successfully completing his task, Tu Ta left the platform and vacated his position for someone else. The cultivators from the celestial realm all wore ashen expressions. Under the condition of having similar battle prowess, prodigies from the foreign realm could battle against 3 prodigies from the celestial realm. Their stamina was far too terrifying. Fortunately, they were the defending party. If the foreign realm attacked the Clear Heaven Pass, they wouldn't need to worry about the weakness of not having enough power of regulations. "Ha ha ha, it's mine, Mulung's time to shine now," another prodigy from the foreign realm said as they walked onto the platform. He was a humanoid with a pair of wings and a long tail. However, he also had a pair of horns protruding from his head, and his skin was crimson like blood and densely covered with symbols. "Who's going to battle against me?" he roared, with his voice booming like thunder. This was another 5th secret monarch tier. There were naturally young prodigies from the celestial realm who stepped forward to accept his challenge. However, the problem still remained. They couldn't gain an advantage in terms of battle prowess, and their stamina was also clearly inferior. That being the case, how could they hope to achieve victory? 3 young monarch tiers accepted his challenge one after another, and only then was Mulung's stamina finally depleted. However, they were still unable to achieve a single victory for the celestial realm. Fretful and anxious expressions appeared on the faces of the cultivators from the celestial realm. Were they going to continue losing like this? "Niao will battle." Hunyo couldn't help but jump forward. A young girl with delicate skin and tender flesh. "I'm going to gobble you up. You're definitely full of nutrients." The opponent was an emerald green insect. He looked like a grasshopper, yet his strength was surprisingly great. He had already defeated a 5th secret monarch tier. Without speaking another word, Hunyo directly swung her small fists. Ling Han smiled in his mind. With a single thought, a wisp of mystical power instantly crept into Hunyo's body, elevating her battle prowess. Pum! Hunyo unleashed her might, and she instantly gained the upper hand. She was already a supreme monarch tier, and it was only because she hadn't come across enough opportunities that she hadn't cultivated 9 divided souls in the dividing soul tier. However, this imperfection still couldn't conceal her immense power. One had to realize that she had cultivated a secret realm of time. In fact, All 5 of her secret realms were secret realms of time. She possessed the greatest eternity immortal physique, and she had the ability to manipulate time. Her battle prowess was most likely at a level between Supreme Monarch Tears and Monarch Stars, so she could have actually gained an advantage even without Ling Han's help. Pung, pung, pung. Her battle instinct was extremely powerful, and once she gained an upper hand, she would firmly hold onto it with both hands, rapidly transforming this advantage into victory. The insect from the foreign realm was both furious and astonished. His opponent clearly wasn't a monarch star, so why could her battle prowess let her suppress him? She was measly trash from a super low-level dimension, so how was she more powerful than him, a monarch tier? However, this was the undisputed reality, and the insect from the foreign realm had 2 of his legs brutally snapped by the young woman. He had no option but to admit defeat. Otherwise, he would have been mercilessly dismembered by Hunyao. They had won. The cultivators from the celestial realm all cheered in delight. They had finally won a battle. They had finally achieved this extremely difficult feat. Hunyao placed her hands on her hips and said in a delicate voice, "Who's next? It's best if you have some flesh. Niao doesn't like to eat insects." Her words infuriated the cultivators from the foreign realm. It had only ever been them who had eaten the cultivators from the celestial realm. Now, however, this young woman was actually saying that she wanted to eat them. How could they not be infuriated? "Who's going to defeat this piece of weak trash?" they all shouted. However, the cultivator who had been defeated by her was already a prodigy among the 5th secret monarch tiers. So finding someone even stronger than him was almost an impossible task. By the looks of it, they could only rely on their monarch stars. The mighty figures from the foreign realm were also slightly reluctant about this. They wanted to comprehensively shatter the morale of the celestial realm, so they naturally had to achieve crushing victory in each different level. By actively deploying a monarch star first, wouldn't they be somewhat admitting the strength of the celestial realm? In fact, wouldn't that be admitting inferiority? Chapter 2255, Low Morale. Chapter 2255, Low Morale. However, if they didn't deploy a monarch star, how could they suppress Hunyao? A humanoid being stepped forward. Even though his skin was crimson red, it was decorated with thin golden trails that radiated with an air of might and dominance. "Xian too," he said as he pointed at himself. He glared at Hunyao, and he didn't conceal his surging, killing intent at all. "Girl, come back," a mighty figure from the celestial realm said to Hunyao. Xian too was a monarch star, so she couldn't face him head-on. Otherwise, her fate would be certain death. Hunyao had initially been unwilling, but upon hearing Ling Han secretly telling her to retreat, she pouted her lips and retreated to the side. Afterward, this would be a stage for monarch stars, one in which even monarch tiers didn't have the right to enter. Of course, this was unless they possessed a significant advantage in terms of cultivation level. The Rain Emperor was the first to step forward. The 2 monarch stars immediately unleashed their full strength to clash with each other. One of them was at the 6th secret, while the other was at the 6th layer of the 8th lotus. Their cultivation level was identical, yet the Rain Emperor was the one with the superior battle prowess. The Rain Emperor was a genuine cultivation prodigy, and his battle talent and ability were inconceivably freakish. Add to that the celestial Tao physique that he had obtained, and his battle prowess was naturally even higher. It wasn't long before he gained the upper hand and completely suppressed Xian Tuesday. This elicited thunderous cheers from the celestial realm. Meanwhile, the cultivators from the foreign realm fell quiet. Were they going to lose 2 battles in a row? More importantly, both of these losses were against opponents at the same cultivation level. This was a huge blow to their morale. The foreign realm was higher in level than the celestial realm, so in a battle against someone at the same cultivation level, they should have possessed an advantage. Xian too unleashed all of his abilities, yet facing the fist technique of the Rain Emperor, He had absolutely no chance to turn the tables. He was continually pummeled, and one of his arms was evenly violently torn off. However, his counterattacks could barely leave any marks on the Rain Emperor. This was because the Rain Emperor could transform into the flow of time. It was as if he existed in the past, yet it was also as if he existed in the future. As such, how could he be wounded? If the other party wanted to wound the Rain Emperor's celestial physique, he needed to possess a noticeable advantage in cultivation level. "That's enough," an elite from the foreign realm said. However, the Rain Emperor completely ignored him. As long as his opponent still stood on the platform, he wouldn't relent a single bit. "I told you to stop," the elite from the foreign realm said in rage, reaching over to grab at the Rain Emperor. This is a battle between youths, so why are you trying to interfere?" A mighty figure from the celestial realm said as they reached over to block the elite from the foreign realm. Pum! The elite from the foreign realm was instantly sent flying. Just then, a celestial king from the celestial realm had called for an end to the first battle. Yet an elite from the foreign realm had stepped forward to interfere. Now, the exact opposite was happening. At this moment, it was as if the cultivators from the celestial realm had ingested a top-notch celestial pill. They felt as euphoric as could be. The attacks of the Rain Emperor didn't stop, and half of Xan 2's body was utterly mangled and destroyed. However, a monarch star was a monarch star, after all, and he ultimately managed to escape. They had won another battle. The cultivators from the celestial realm were beside themselves with delight. It had already been too long since they had witnessed such a satisfying victory. The foreign realm remained silent for a moment before sending forth a new competitor. Sun Luo. Not only was he a monarch star, but he was more so a supreme freak at the 10th layer of the 8th lotus. This was equivalent to a 10th secret elite. The Rain Emperor attacked, yet the gulf between the 6th secret and the 10th secret was far too great. He was sent flying with a single strike, and if it weren't for Ling Han's secret help, he would have definitely been killed in an instant. Proud expressions returned to the faces of the cultivators from the foreign realm. Perhaps the Rain Emperor was powerful, but they had even more powerful prodigies. Everything would be fine as long as they ultimately achieved victory. It was as if the celestial realm would definitely be defeated by the foreign realm. Sun Luo possessed a towering physique. He was a humanoid, and his skin was so red that it was almost black. There was a golden horn on his head, and he also had a tail that was astonishingly long, so much so that it was like a hand. His tail continued to coil and swish around. He wore an expression of pride and arrogance as he looked toward the celestial realm, saying, "Who's coming up to die?" Whoosh! A figure materialized. It was none other than Shurchanzi. "This humble monk will battle against you," Shurchanzi said in a seemingly amiable voice. However, when he attacked, it was as if he were a demonic deity. He possessed the demeanor of the Buddhist sect's 9 lights, ancient Buddha. Moreover, he was indeed powerful, and his golden body mystical power had already been cultivated to a pinnacle level. His body transformed into a golden god of battle, and when he tapped his finger for the ages, he could seemingly exterminate celestials and slay gods. Ling Han was astonished by what he saw. Shurchanzi had actually reached the 9th secret. This was incredibly astonishing. Only 1,000 years or so had passed. Yet he had actually soared from the 1st secret to the 9th secret. This progress was far too rapid. However, this was still completely useless. Sun Luo's cultivation level was equivalent to the 10th secret, which was an entire minor level above Shurchanzi. Moreover, who were they? They were monarch stars. They had reached the pinnacle level, a state of perfection, in each cultivation level. It was only because of this that they could enjoy the title of monarch star. That being the case, a gap of 1 minor level was naturally an insurmountable gulf. Shurchanzi unleashed all of his abilities, yet he could only wind up with a resounding defeat. He more so suffered a severe wound, with a bloody hole punched open in his lower abdomen. Hong Huang and Jia Lan stepped forward one after another, Yet neither of them could escape the fate of defeat. There was nothing they could have done about this, either. After all, they were only at the 9th secret. The morale of the celestial realm fell to rock bottom. Only Xing Chenyue had yet to battle, with the other prodigies completely unable to rival Sun Luo. Sure enough, the next person to step forward was Xing Chenyue. This was the celestial realm's final hope. Xing Chenyue was tall and slender, and she had raven black hair that stretched down to her knees. She was wearing a white dress, and even though it had no decorations, she was still a beautiful sight to behold. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, and her long hair gently flowed with the soft breeze. She was like an ethereal celestial maiden. However, Sun Luo didn't appreciate her beauty at all. They were from two starkly different realms, so he was naturally unable to appreciate Xing Chenyue's charm. On the contrary, a look of cruel bloodlust appeared in his eyes, and he said, "Female being, you're quite extraordinary. There's a hint of source power in your blood, and if I can refine you, this will bring me great benefits." In the eyes of the beings from the foreign realm, the cultivators from the celestial realm weren't people at all. They were no different from livestock. Xing Chenyue simply flicked her sleeve, and she appeared as elegant as could be. "Haha, you're mine!" Sun Luo roared as he unleashed an attack at Xing Chenyue. As they exchanged attacks, the cultivators from the celestial realm finally breathed a sigh of relief. This was because Xing Chenyue wasn't suppressed at all. However, in the next instant, they immediately furrowed their brows. In a battle between cultivators from the two realms, as long as the cultivator from the celestial realm didn't gain the upper hand, they would definitely end up losing. Why? Because of regulations. This was the neutral zone, where they couldn't replenish their power of regulations. Thus, whoever could lock more regulations in their body would ultimately end up being the victor. Sure enough, after battling for around 10 hours, Xing Chenyue started to show signs of fatigue. This was inevitable. Regulations were the weapons of cultivators, and without them, they would be like toothless beasts. After exchanging several more strikes, Xing Chenyue was forced to admit defeat. If she hadn't admitted defeat, she would have genuinely been captured and devoured by Sun Luo. What now? Even Xing Chenyue had been defeated, and the celestial realm had suffered another resounding defeat. Thankfully, they had at least won 2 duels, and therefore won 20,000 years of peace for the celestial realm. Ha 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 ha. The cultivators from the foreign realm all roared with laughter. They were brimming with prodigies, and just Sun Luo alone had been able to suppress the entire younger generation of the celestial realm. They still had Nai Yu and Wu Exayan who hadn't participated yet. As for the strongest Qi Shui, he more so didn't need to participate. Meanwhile, the celestial realm was feeling stifled under a dreary atmosphere. No one was in the mood to speak. Was the gulf between the two sides truly so great? At this moment, a person suddenly walked out from among the celestial realm cultivators. He's Ji Wuming. Huh, what use is trying to be brave and stepping forward? Even Xing Chenyue was defeated. Indeed, even though Ji Wuming is also a monarch star, he's only at the same level as Shi Chanzi and Hong Huang. He's nowhere near the level of Xing Chenyue. Even if he battles, he'll only collect another defeat for us. The cultivators from the celestial realm all shook their heads. What did it matter that Ji Wuming was a monarch star? He could only collect another defeat for them. Ji Wuming glanced at Sun Luo. Boom! A formidable aura surged into the surroundings. 10th secret! Everyone exclaimed in astonishment.